Chapter 283. The energy in Leng Shiqi's sword qi was actually of the same origin as Ozu's lotus sword qi. The gigantic rainbow lotus in the sky and Leng Shiqi's rainbow sword qi devoured each other, and neither could do anything to the other. When Leng Shiqi heard Ozu say the words Wuxia, his heart skipped a beat. He circulated the five-god flowing light technique with all his might, and his body lit up with a faint five-colored light, confirming his identity. Ozu bathed in the seven-colored light and laughed. Ha ha ha, Wuxia, you want to obtain the inheritance of my cultivation technique, but I also want to obtain your cultivation technique. This place is specially designed to cultivate the 1,000 revolutions illusory world technique. It is my home ground. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi also realized that although he could also mobilize the seven-colored light, it was much less than Ozu's. He simulated the voice of Wuxia and said, Ozu, even if you are stronger than me, it will be very difficult for you to defeat me in a short period of time. With such a big commotion here, the people you deliberately lured away will return very quickly. At that time, even if you can activate the power of the seven-colored light, you won't be able to survive the siege of hundreds of spirit cultivators. Ozu obviously realized this as well. He retracted his smile and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. You're right, but if it really comes to that, I'll reveal your identity. At most, we'll die together. Leng Shiqi silently gave Delta Origi a look, telling her not to act rashly. He said to Ozu, then why do we have to fight to the death here? Since you're here, it means that you've made other discoveries after leaving the illusory spirit realm. Why don't you share it with me? If you have any conditions, feel free to state them. Ozu muttered to himself and said, it's not impossible to share, but you have to give me a portion of the cultivation technique you obtained first. And who is this girl? She's already at the Spirit Pulse realm at such a young age, and her combat strength is also very astonishing. What is her identity? Delta Origi raised her head and said, listen carefully, Ozu was waiting for the next part. Most of his attention was on the Delta Origi. At this moment, 3 blood tattoos appeared on Leng Shiqi's forehead, and a silver-white cape appeared behind him. He used the Serene Fiend Blood Tattoo and the Holy Silver Deer's Beast Qi Battle Tattoo. He held the Qing Lin saber in his hand and turned into a black and white phantom, directly arriving in front of Ozu. Ozu did not expect the Leng Shiqi to suddenly attack. He roared as if he had gone mad. With a slash of the spirit sword in his hand, the seven-colored light in the air poured down. Thousands of seven-colored sword qi sealed off the entire peak. Even a spirit aperture realm expert would not be able to do such a thing. However, the Leng Shiqi had also attracted a lot of seven-colored light to his body. Just as the boundless sword qi fell, the spirit saber was unsheathed. Among the sword qi that filled the sky, a cold saber light suddenly flashed. That saber light was just a flash. It was not eye-catching at all in the dazzling seven-colored light. However, it was this inconspicuous saber light that instantly shattered all the seven-colored sword qi. Even the streams of light were swept away. A large hole suddenly appeared in the seven-colored sky. It was as if only that saber light was allowed to exist in this world. A flash in the pan. This was the flash in the pan of Leng Shiqi's fusion of the saber drawing technique and the full moon swift slash. With this move, the demonic beast blood tattoo armor, beast qi battle tattoo, and serene fiend blood tattoo on Leng Shiqi's body all dissipated. His body suddenly felt weak. This saber contained all his spirit power, strength, blood qi, and spiritual power. Now, the spirit power in his body had been emptied of more than 70 to 80%. On the other side, with a ding sound, the rank 5 spirit sword in Ozu's hand was cut into 2. A slender saber mark appeared on his face, almost splitting his face into 2 halves. Ozu's eyes seemed to have lost their spirit. For a moment, he was stunned. If it wasn't for the rank 5 spirit sword blocking for him, his head would have been separated from his body. This Wuxia was actually so strong. Even though he had mobilized the power of the heaven and earth vision, he still almost died at the hands of the other party. As an outstanding disciple of the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect and the inheritance of the Divine Illusion Palace, Ozu naturally had a sense of pride. But now, Leng Shiqi smashed his arrogance to smithereens. Ozu was stunned, but someone else was not. That was Delta Origi. At first, Delta Origi was also shocked by Leng Shiqi's heaven-splitting saber strike. However, Leng Shiqi had given her too many surprises. She already had some resistance, so she quickly reacted. This was the best time to kill Ozu. Delta Origi's entire body emitted cracking sounds as if countless bones were dislocated. Then, she actually pulled out her spine from her back. She held the spine like a sword or a whip. Then, dozens of weak and boneless sword shadows pierced towards Ozu with a dense aura of death. What was even more terrifying was that those sword shadows actually emitted a faint layer of ghostly fire. Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat when he saw this move. The power of this sword move had already far surpassed a rank 4 spiritual skill. It was probably a rank 5 spiritual skill. He couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Having a heavenly origin realm master was indeed different. Ozu finally woke up. When he saw Delta Origi's attack, he immediately exclaimed, "Ghost Bone Cold Fire Sword. Who is the Blood Cloak Pavilion's Bone Devil to you?" Of course, Delta Origi wouldn't answer him. She didn't need to answer a dead person. Ozu wanted to resist, but the colorful light around him had already been swept away by Leng Shiqi. He was now an injured second-level Spirit Vein Realm cultivator. Without a spirit sword, how could he resist Delta Origi's Ghost Bone Cold Fire Sword? At this moment, a ray of golden light shot out from the east. The sun had come out. Ozu immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He muttered, "The time has finally come. I just don't know if it's true or not." Seeing that Delta Origi's sword was about to reach him, he couldn't hesitate anymore. He gritted his teeth and jumped off the cliff. Delta Origi's sword pierced through the air. She couldn't help but frown. Ozu's actions were clearly beyond her expectations. Leng Shiqi swallowed 2 pills to recover his spirit energy in a row and quickly walked to the edge of the cliff. His white eyes suddenly revealed a look of shock. Delta Origi turned her head and asked, "What did you find?" Leng Shiqi said, "Something's wrong. I don't see Ozu's spirit energy aura. My supercilious eyes can see within a radius of 4 to 5 miles. It's impossible for him to fall so far in such a short period of time." "You mean he disappeared?" Countless possibilities flashed through Leng Shiqi's mind. He thought that Ozu seemed to have muttered something before he jumped off the cliff, and he jumped off the cliff at sunrise. Was this all a coincidence? His eyes flashed as he said to Delta Origi, "Wait for me here." With that, Leng Shiqi also jumped off the cliff. What he didn't expect was that Delta Origi also jumped down. Chapter 284. After Leng Shiqi, Delta Origi, and Ozu all jumped off the cliff, a large group of people rushed back to the peak. These people had been lured away by Ozu from the beginning. That Ozu was very fast, and it took them some effort to catch him. However, they discovered that Ozu was a fake. That person was only wearing a human skin mask that looked exactly like Ozu's face. It was also at that moment that they all sensed the huge spiritual fluctuations coming from the peak and turned back. Unfortunately, other than a dozen people who had fallen to the ground, there was no one else on the peak. Everyone's faces were filled with the word, dumbfounded. Leng Shiqi, Delta Origi, and Ozu were already in a secret realm. After they fell off the cliff, a hole opened at the intersection of the sun's golden light and the 7-colored light. They fell into this secret realm through that hole. This secret realm was not big, only about 5 or 6 miles in radius. Looking at the sky, the secret realm sky was surging with 7-colored light like clouds. In the center of the secret realm, there was a thatched hut, surrounded by some flowers, grass, and fruit trees. Other than that, there was nothing else. At this moment, Ozu was staring at Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi. Leng Shiqi stared at Delta Origi. In Ozu's opinion, he knew the secret here, and at the same time, he dared to jump down because he was gambling. Leng Shiqi and Ozu dared to jump? What lunatics! From Leng Shiqi's point of view, he had guessed that the southern divine peak was related to the illusory spirit secret realm. He and Ozu both had the inheritance of the divine dream palace. Since Ozu dared to jump, he dared to jump as well. However, Delta Origi also jumped down, which really scared him out of his wits. If this secret realm could only accept people with the Divine Dream Palace's cultivation method, Delta Origi would have been smashed to pieces. Fortunately, Delta Origi could enter this secret realm as well. As for Delta Origi, She wasn't that pretentious. She knew Lung Shiqi the best. Since he dared to jump, it meant that there wouldn't be any danger, so she jumped down as well. Therefore, she was also very puzzled. Why was Lung Shiqi staring at her like that? Thus, up until now, the three of them were in a state of confusion. Gu San was the first to make a move. She held her bone sword, and a faint ghost fire appeared on the blade. She was about to attack. However, Oziu shouted loudly, "Wait!" Oziu's throat, O's throat, was still locked. The tip of the sword was still locked of Oza's throat. At this moment, Oziu suddenly snapped his fingers. Immediately, the seven-colored stream of light in the sky kept circling above his head. This place has limitless power for me to use. You are no match for me here. But Oziu pointed at Lung Shiqi and said, he can also mobilize a portion of the power of light. Although he doesn't have as much as I do, there are two of you, so I admit that I can't kill you. However, you can't kill me either. Delta Origi snorted coldly. How do you know if you don't try? While Oziu was speaking, Lung Shiqi had been secretly observing this small secret realm. Then he said, "You're right. The power of light here far surpasses that of the outside world. Even if we use all our strength, it will be difficult to kill you. If you have something to say, just say it." Oziu smiled lightly and said, "Sure enough, it's easier to talk to a man." Delta Origi's face darkened, but she didn't say anything. Oziu said, "What I mean is that there's no need for us to fight to the death. I still say the same thing. Why don't you and I share our cultivation methods? You came to kill me because you want my cultivation method inheritance. I can also tell you that the cultivation method I obtained is the illusory technique of 1,000 revolutions. You're also someone who obtained the inheritance of a cultivation method. If I'm not wrong, the cultivation method you obtained is also sealed. So, you should know that even if you force me, I can only give you the first level of the cultivation method at most. You can forget about getting the rest." Lung Shiqi nodded and said, "That's true. What do you want?" "Zhuoqiu, no, you're not Zhuoqiu. Even your current appearance is not your true appearance." Since Lung Shiqi came to the Southern God Peak with the identity of Old Man Lu, he was wearing the demonic beast blood pattern armor when he fought with Oziu. Oziu used the cultivation method to determine that he was Zhuoqiu. Now, Lung Shiqi revealed the appearance of Old Man Lu, without the cover of the armor. Naturally, he revealed that he was not Zhuoqiu. Oziu said, "I'm not interested in your true identity. Why don't we sit on a business deal? This can be considered a little sincerity from me. You want to exchange cultivation methods, right?" Lung Shiqi had already guessed what Oziu was going to say. Oziu nodded and said, "That's right. You and I are both at the early stage of the Spirit Pulse realm. We only have the first level of the cultivation method. Our cultivation methods come from the same source. If we can verify each other, we will definitely benefit a lot." Lung Shiqi did not say anything. Oziu continued, "You can think about it first. Also, this little girl should be an assassin from the Blood Garment Pavilion." Oziu changed the topic to Delta Origi. He recognized the Delta Origi's moves on the cliff, so it was easy for him to guess her identity. "What you want is my head. I can give it to you as well." Oziu's words were shocking. He actually said such a sentence. Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi were confused. Just now, Oziu said that there was no need to fight to the death and exchange cultivation methods with Lung Shiqi. Now, he wanted to give away his head? What was Oziu selling in his gourd? Lung Shiqi suddenly thought of the Oziu, who had led everyone away at the beginning. He said, "Do you want to use a disguise technique to disguise yourself? Do you think the Blood Garment Pavilion and the employer are fools?" Oziu snorted coldly and said, "The one outside is just an idiot who was controlled by my illusion technique. Look at this." He took out a dark red square box from his mustard seed bag. Lung Shiqi took it and opened it. Then his eyes narrowed slightly. Inside the box was a head. Oziu's head. Oziu said, "Don't make a fuss. This head is not disguised in any way. You can take it to report." "If this head is real, then who are you?" Delta Origi asked coldly. "Who said he's real? I just said that there's no disguise." I'm Ozu, and the owner of this head is Ozisu. He's my twin brother. Lang Shiqi secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. He said, "You've already prepared this head, haven't you?" The Southern Divine Peak is in Mukon County. As everyone knows, this is the headquarters of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Those sanctimonious people from the Thousand Illusion Sword sect will definitely find assassins from the Blood Garment Pavilion to kill me. Although he did not answer directly, the meaning of his words was already very obvious. Ozu had already made all the plans before coming to the Southern Divine Peak. He had already expected that the Blood Garment Pavilion would kill him. Even if he could use the seven-colored flowing light to fight against the enemy, if the assassins from the Blood Garment Pavilion failed, there would be stronger assassins coming next time. Sooner or later, he would be killed by the assassins. Therefore, he prepared the head of his twin brother. He was good at illusions and could completely fake his death to escape. Thinking of this, Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi had to admit that Ozu was indeed ruthless and shrewd. Chapter 285. In the small secret realm, Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi fell into silence. The main purpose of their trip was to assassinate Ozu. If possible, it would be best to obtain the inheritance of his cultivation method. Now that Ozu had taken out a head that could be passed off as the real thing, they could take it to hand in their mission. As for the cultivation method, they could also exchange it with him. All of this seemed to be good. For Ozu, he had not only escaped the pursuit of the Blood Clothing Pavilion, but also obtained Lang Shiqi's cultivation method. It was killing two birds with one stone. In this way, this was really a win-win deal. However, Lang Shiqi still had a question in his heart. Your twin brother's head can be temporarily deceived, but as long as someone finds out about your brother's death, they will still suspect that you used the flower transplant technique to fake your death. A hint of hatred appeared on Ozu's face. Do you think that my family will still be safe after I become a traitor of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? Do you think that this head is the one that I killed my own brother? This is him. He gave it to me of his own accord. Ozu's eyes were instantly filled with countless blood vessels. His handsome face also became ferocious, and his entire body emitted an astonishing amount of hatred. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi looked at each other. At this moment, their hearts couldn't help but fluctuate. It seemed that there was an unknown secret behind Ozu's betrayal of the sect. However, Lang Shiqi wasn't interested in these things. Since there was no flaw in this head, he accepted it. This action also meant that he agreed to Ozu's suggestion. Seeing this, Ozu slowly calmed down and said, "You can cultivate here for the next 2 or 3 months." What? 2 or 3 months? Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi were shocked when they heard this. Ozu said, "The entrance to this small secret realm will only open when the 7-colored stream of light appears on the southern god peak and the first ray of sunlight intersects. So if you want to go out, you can only wait for the next time." This. Lang Shiqi didn't know what to say. 2 or 3 months was not a long time. Moreover, he had a habit of storing a lot of food and water in his mustard seed bag. Therefore, it was not impossible for him to live here for a period of time. But the missions they accepted had a time limit. 1 month's time limit. By the time they left, the mission would have expired. Furthermore, Wuxia had told him not to run around randomly. It was not a big deal for him to run to the Southern Divine Peak. After all, it was not that far away. But if he were to stay here for 2 to 3 months, he would have to endure Wuxia's wrath when he got out. Lang Shiqi frowned and asked, "Is there no other way?" "No." Ozu answered firmly. "This is actually the place where one of the 3 palace masters of the Divine Illusion Palace, Thousand Chance Illusion, went into closed-door cultivation. It was a coincidence that I was able to come here. Apart from the method I just mentioned, there was no other way. Besides, the spirit power here is even denser than in the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Especially for you, you can use the power of the flowing light here to quickly increase your cultivation. What a great opportunity this is. And you're actually not happy." With that said, Lang Shiqi could only accept this fact. Moreover, as Ozu said, this place was indeed a treasured place for Lang Shiqi to cultivate. At this moment, he finally understood that Ozu had spent so much effort to come here to cultivate. At the same time, he could also avoid being hunted down. It was indeed a good place. But how did Ozu know about this place? How did he know the way to enter the secret realm? Could this have something to do with his betrayal of the sect? Questions appeared in Lang Shiqi's mind one after another. He even began to doubt the authenticity of Ozu falling in love with the witch of the demonic path. However, not long ago, he was still fighting to the death with Ozu. In the end, they were still enemies. Therefore, even if he asked, Ozu would not say anything. Next, Lang Shiqi and Ozu exchanged cultivation techniques. He also obtained the first level of the illusory world art of 1,000 revolutions. Then, Ozu ignored them and went into the thatched hut to cultivate. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi walked to the side of the secret realm. He said, "How trustworthy do you think Ozu's words are?" Delta Origi replied, "It doesn't matter whether we believe the rest or not. Now that we've gotten what we want, it's enough as long as the matter of getting out is true." Lang Shiqi nodded. During this period of time, we must not let our guard down. After all, this is his home ground. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. On this day, Lang Shiqi and Ozu sat cross-legged facing each other. Their eyes were shining with a 7-colored light. Delta Origi was playing with a white bone dagger in boredom. Obviously, she was used to this kind of behavior from the two of them. After a long while, Ozu snorted. His face turned slightly pale, and his eyes returned to normal. He sighed softly and said, "Sigh, I lost again. Brother Lang is still better." Lang Shiqi chuckled and said, "I only have the advantage of mental power. In terms of control of illusion, Brother O is still better." Ozu waved his hand and said, all right. A loss is a loss. Let's call it a day. Then we'll take our leave first." Lang Shiqi then got up and returned to his hut with Delta Origi. In the past 3 months, Lang Shiqi and Ozu had gotten to know each other through fighting. In the beginning, they were still on guard against each other. Later, as a deal, they guided each other's cultivation techniques. The two of them were both good at swordsmanship and illusion. When they had nothing to do, they would spar a little. Gradually, they felt like they had met each other earlier. Now, they would routinely spar with swordsmanship and illusion every day. However, Lang Shiqi won more than he lost. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi could not be used as beds and blankets all day long in this secret realm. Thus, Lang Shiqi used the Hand of Earth to build 2 mud houses. These days were perhaps the most comfortable period of time for the two of them. There was no killing, no crisis, and no deception. Every day, they cultivated and sparred. When they had nothing to do, they could chat. Their days were very quiet. Fortunately, there were many fruit trees in this secret realm, so they did not have to worry about food. Since Lang Shiqi also cultivated the 1,000 revolutions illusory world technique, he had a unique advantage in cultivating here. After consuming the 3 revolution spirit melting pill, just 2 days ago, his cultivation was already at the 3rd level of the spiritual pulse realm. This speed was even faster than Ozu's. Right now, Ozu was still stuck between the 2nd and 3rd level of the spiritual pulse realm. He was still troubled by opening his spiritual pulse. The main reason was that Lang Shiqi's spiritual pulse had already been opened. All he needed to do was to accumulate spiritual power. In this small secret realm, the spiritual power was already very rich. He could also absorb the 7-colored flowing light and convert it into spiritual power. That was why he had such a terrifying cultivation speed. Delta Origi's progress was also not small. Although she could not actively absorb the 7-colored flowing light, even if she passively absorbed it in this environment, her cultivation had reached the peak of the 1st level. It was a pity that Lang Shiqi had also taught her the introductory chapter of the 5-God flowing light technique, but Delta Origi could not comprehend it. She did not have the talent in illusion. However, just after Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi took a few steps, the 7-colored light in the sky above the secret realm suddenly surged like the wind in clouds. They looked at each other and saw a touch of joy in each other's eyes. The exit of the secret realm was about to open. Chapter 286. At this time, Ozu walked over. He hesitated for a moment before saying to Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi, "You must be careful when you go out. There might be experts eyeing you." Lang Shiqi raised his eyebrows. Ozu seemed to know something. He asked, "What do you mean?" Ozu sighed deeply and said, Forget it, there's no harm in telling you this. This is about my betrayal of the sect. Ozu then told them the whole story of his betrayal of the sect. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi were both shocked and bewildered. It turned out that ever since Ozu obtained the inheritance of the cultivation method in the illusory spirit secret realm, he had fallen into a deep vortex. The Thousand Illusion Sword sect's ultimate skill, the Thousand Illusion Sword Art, was a mysterious sword manual that combined swordsmanship and illusion. However, how many people in the world could be proficient in both swordsmanship and illusion at the same time? Not to mention combining the two. Hundreds of years ago, the founder of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the Thousand Illusion Sword Sovereign, was a talented person. The Thousand Illusion Sword sect was also promoted to one of the 8 Wastelands weapon paths under his hands. However, in the past few hundred years, although the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had produced a few experts of the Heavenly Yuan stage, none of them had been able to fully comprehend the Thousand Illusion Sword Art. No one could practice the fundamental cultivation method of a sect, so the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had been relying on its foundation. In the past 200 years, there had been no experts of the Heavenly Yuan stage. Now, the head of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect was old to the point of decay. Once the current head died, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect would no longer have any experts of the Heavenly Yuan stage. It was very likely that they would fall out of the 8 Wastelands weapon paths. Therefore, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect urgently needed another profound cultivation method to save their ending. The cultivation method that Ozu obtained in the illusory spirit secret realm became their hope. As soon as Ozu returned to the sect, he was persuaded by a group of elders to hand over the cultivation method. Ozu could understand the difficulties of the sect, but he only had the first level of the Thousand Revolutions illusory world technique. The rest was sealed in the depths of his mind. What he said was the truth, but when it fell into the ears of others, it became perfunctory. The upper echelons of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect were unhappy, but Ozu was their future hope, so it wasn't good to make things too stiff. Thus, Ozu was placed under house arrest. Every day, people came to persuade him. But one day, for some reason, Ozu had a conflict with a deacon elder who came to persuade him. He even killed 2 of the elder's disciples. Once this matter came out, it blew up. Ozu was captured on the spot and sent to the torture hall. According to him, he did make a move at that time, but he was actually controlled by someone. Some people believed what he said, but the majority of the people still didn't believe it. There were even some who suggested searching Ozu's memories and directly extracting the cultivation method. However, this method could easily cause Ozu's mental strength to collapse and directly become an idiot, thus destroying a peerless genius. What was laughable was that there were actually quite a few people who agreed with this approach. In their opinion, as long as the sect had a cultivation method, they would have a foundation, which was equivalent to having a chance to rise again. Even if he had to sacrifice a genius, it would be worth it. This matter was too important, and the upper echelons of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect argued endlessly about it. And the strange thing was, just when Ozu thought that he couldn't escape death, someone actually quietly let him go, and escorted him all the way out of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. After that, he made his preparations and went all the way to the Southern Divine Peak, where he met Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi. As for the matter of him falling in love with the demonic path witch, it was purely false. Hearing this, Lang Shiqi's first reaction was that there was a ghost. In the first half of this story, it was still understandable. A sect that had already begun to decline, in order to protect the position of the 8 desolate weapons path, it was indeed possible for them to interrogate their disciples about their cultivation method. However, from the fact that Ozu had suddenly killed someone and was let go, it was as if there was a pair of big hands behind all of this. In that case, the person behind Ozu's arrival at the Southern Divine Peak must have known. Now that Ozu had suddenly disappeared here for 3 months, it was very likely that the other party had set up a lot of spies in the Southern Divine Peak to look for Ozu. If Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi suddenly appeared, it was indeed possible for them to be targeted. Lang Shiqi said at this time, "We will be careful about this matter. Brother O, it's best if you don't go out casually." Ozu said, "Go out? I won't go out until I reach the Spirit Aperture Realm." Spirit Aperture Realm? Ozu actually wanted to cultivate to the Spirit Aperture Realm in one go. However, even if he cultivated in this secret realm, it would take him at least 2 or 3 years. In other words, he would have to stay in this uninhabited place for 2 or 3 years. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi couldn't help but be moved. Especially Delta Origi. She knew the pain of cultivating alone the best. At this moment, she couldn't help but admire Ozu. At this time, a crack appeared in the air of the small secret realm. Lang Shiqi knew that the time had come and couldn't be delayed any longer. He cupped his fists and said, "See you later." "See you later." Then, Lang Shiqi brought Delta Origi into the crack. Outside. Today was the day when the southern divine peak appeared again, and it still attracted many people to come and watch. However, what no one noticed was that two figures suddenly appeared on the side of the cliff at the top of the mountain. After Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi left the secret realm, Delta Origi threw out a bone whip and deeply embedded it into the mountain wall. She pulled hard, and Lang Shiqi was stuck to the mountain wall. Then, Lang Shiqi used the hand of earth, and the two of them disappeared into the mountain wall. Their series of actions were all discussed in advance. Their movements were very fast and very quiet, but that little bit of sound still attracted the attention of someone. This was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His cheeks were very old, his skin was dark, and his face was fierce. Originally, he was also admiring the light in the sky, but suddenly his ears twitched slightly, and he immediately heard the sound on the mountain wall. Then, he closed his eyes and carefully sensed. Soon, he noticed a very faint spiritual energy fluctuation under his feet. The corner of his mouth curled up into a sinister smile, and he turned around and walked down the peak. Not long after, Lang Shiqi brought Delta Origi from underground to the mountainside of the southern divine peak and returned to the surface. Delta Origi let out a sigh of relief and said, "We're finally out." Lang Shiqi also laughed in his heart. Back then, they accepted the mission to assassinate Ozu. First, it was to give Delta Origi blood drops, and second, it was to bring her out to take a look. In the end, not only did they not obtain any blood drops, but they were also trapped for 3 months. At this time, it was raining. The originally colorless rain turned into a rainbow-colored rain under the 7-colored light. It was beautiful. This made the two of them feel a little better. However, at this moment, Lang Shiqi was shocked. He suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. It turned out that at some point in time, a huge ice hand had already fallen down with extreme cold power. Chapter 287. The giant ice palm smashed down with the power of extreme ice, turning the surrounding trees into ice sculptures in an instant. Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi were both shocked. They were at the early stage of the spirit pulse realm, but they felt as if they had fallen into a 10,000-year-old ice cellar. Even the spiritual energy in their bodies was about to be frozen. The person who attacked was at least a spirit aperture realm expert. Although they were shocked, they didn't slow down. As they retreated, several bone shields appeared around Delta Origi to protect her. Lang Shiqi instantly activated his demonic beast blood rune armor and sent out 6 palm shadows. The palm shadows immediately attracted the surrounding rainbow light. Then, the 6 palm shadows merged into one and turned into a huge rainbow palm shadow. The rainbow palm shadow rose into the sky and collided with the giant ice palm. Boom! The two forces exploded. With Lang Shiqi as the center, the ground within a radius of 10 meters cracked and sank. His rainbow palm shadow had already dissipated, leaving only a thin layer of the giant ice palm, but it still smashed down. Lang Shiqi let out a low roar, and flames suddenly appeared around his feet. The flames spiraled into the air, forming a huge pillar of fire that soared into the sky. This was a spiritual technique that Lang Shiqi created over the past 3 months by combining the fire symbol technique and spirit attack, flame bombardment. Chi. The intertwining of ice and fire caused a large amount of fog. Fortunately, the giant ice palm was finally neutralized. Lang Shiqi roared, "Run!" At this time, Delta Origi's bone shields had already turned into ice shields. She directly gave up on the bone shields and turned to run without hesitation. She knew that with her strength, there was no room for her to intervene. Instead, she would be a burden to Lang Shiqi. She believed that Lang Shiqi, who could use the power of the rainbow light, would have a way to escape. As Delta Origi fled, she also crushed the pendant that she wore. You can actually use part of the world. It's really hard to imagine. A figure appeared in front of Lang Shiqi. Strangely, The raindrops from the sky disappeared automatically when they were a few inches away from him. He was the skinny and dark man who had noticed the commotion just now. "Who are you? Why do you want to kill us?" Lang Shiqi asked in a deep voice. "You've seen Ozu." Lang Shiqi was about to deny it, but the skinny and dark man said, "You don't have to deny it. You have his scent on you. Tell me where he is." "If I tell you I won't have to die?" the man said. "Maybe." Teske. Lang Shiqi sneered, but in fact, he was constantly thinking of a way to escape. "Don't tell me you're still thinking of escaping? That was just a casual attack from me. I just wanted to keep you alive," the man said casually. Then he stretched out a finger, and a dark blue cold air condensed on his finger. No, that wasn't frigid qi, but frigid wind. Gang Spirit Realm. Lang Shiqi was shocked. He was facing a master of Gang Spirit Realm. "Put away all your thoughts and take me to Ozu. This is your only chance to survive." "Oh, that's right. There's also that little girl. She has an ice imprint on her body. With just a thought, I can instantly kill her." "Okay, I promise you." Lang Shiqi nodded with hatred. "Ozu is?" Lang Shiqi suddenly exclaimed. "What is this?" It turned out that colorful petals were falling around them quietly, and the number was increasing. The skinny and dark man also noticed these petals, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. But at this fleeting moment, Lang Shiqi's figure suddenly changed into hundreds of colorful phantoms. The hundreds of phantoms immediately scattered in all directions and fled madly. Seeing this scene, the skinny and dark man was shocked even though he was in Gang Spirit Realm, because he couldn't tell which phantoms were real for a while. He had the ability to sense the breath, but the hundreds of phantoms all had the breath of the real one. He had never seen such a brilliant illusory skill. "Humph!" The skinny and dark man snorted. He pointed his finger as a sword. In an instant endless ice sword aura flew out violently, and the area within a radius of 1,000 feet was covered by the ice sword aura. Most of Lang Shiqi's colorful phantoms were destroyed in an instant. But the rest of the phantoms were still fleeing in all directions, and they were all very fast. The skinny and dark man had not found the real one yet, and his face became ferocious. The ice sword aura burst out under his control. The horrible gang spirit broke out, and the whole mountainside immediately became a mess. The gang spirit destroyed the phantoms one after another. When the last one dissipated, the skinny and dark man was stunned. There was still no real one. All the phantoms were fake. At this time, the skinny and dark man suddenly remembered that when he was on the peak, he had sensed the breath of Lang Shiqi and Delta Origi underground. He immediately understood. Just now, the real one of Lang Shiqi must have drilled into the ground and escaped. The skinny and dark man was furious. He was fooled by a junior in spiritual pulse realm. Ah! A long sword flashing with cold light appeared in the skinny and dark man's hand. It was a 6th-level spiritual weapon. He stood with the sword in his hand, and his whole body burst out an amazing sword intent. "Go to hell!" The skinny and dark man's long sword suddenly stabbed down. Endless ice sword intent poured into the ground, and the whole underground became an ice hell, whether it was the soil or the gravel. After a few seconds, a figure in demon armor drilled out of the ground awkwardly. Of course it was Lang Shiqi. At this moment, his back was covered in frost. Even if he tried his best, he couldn't get rid of it. Fortunately, the demonic beast blood pattern armor didn't let the coldness enter his body for the time being. The moment he drilled out of the ground, he stepped on the black mist and immediately activated the Holy Silver Deer's beast essence battle pattern. He turned into a black and white stream of light and fled as fast as he could. The skinny and dark man swung his sword, and a several-meter-long ice sword intent whizzed out. It directly tore through the sky and cut through space. As the ice sword intent approached, Lang Shiqi suddenly felt that death was coming. Just as he was about to use fleeting epiphyllum to fight for his life, a strange scene appeared. Suddenly, the void seemed to have frozen. Whether it was the rain, the swaying trees, or the huge ice sword intent, they all strangely stopped moving. Even the skinny and dark man didn't move. The only one who could move was Lang Shiqi. He didn't know what had happened. He only knew that now was the best time for him to escape. No, there was still one person who could move. It was a slightly fat man. He was dressed in bloody clothes and walked slowly. He stretched out a hand and clenched it. The arrogant master in Gang Spirit Realm directly burst into a cloud of blood mist. My disciple is not someone trash like you can touch. Chapter 288. The killer was Lung Shiqi's cheap master, Wuxia. Lung Shiqi was really horrified. He was horrified by Wuxia's strength. The one who chased after him was a master of Gang Spirit Realm. He was a master of supreme power who could establish a sect and a second-class force outside. If Lung Shiqi hadn't been able to mobilize part of the power of the colorful flowing light, he would have been killed by the ice handprint. However, Wuxia was able to destroy such an expert with a flip of his hand. This was the strength of a master of oneness of heaven and men realm. This was the strength of a killer of bloody underworld. While Lung Shiqi was still in shock, Wuxia slapped him away. Wuxia said in a sharp voice, "I told you not to run around, but you ran directly to South Divine Peak. What are you doing here? You're so young, but you're so scheming. You came here and hid for 3 months. Do you know how worried I was?" Lung Shiqi was a little touched when he heard this. But Wuxia continued, "Do you know that I went to ask for a good fortune for you, but in the end you disappeared? I've become a joke. Don't I care about my reputation?" Lung Shiqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was touched for nothing, but it was true that Wuxia did save his life. But why did Wuxia appear here? Did he come here specifically to find me? Lung Shiqi thought to himself. But he suddenly shivered and said hurriedly, "By the way, Delta Origi is still nearby." But Wuxia said, "Save it. She has been taken away by Bone Demon." Bone Demon? Bone Demon, the first elder of Blood-Robed Pavilion, a master of Tianyuan realm, also came here in person? It seemed that Delta Origi was very important to Bone Demon. At this time, the power of a remnant soul poured into his body. It was the remnant soul of the master of Gang Spirit Realm, which was a great supplement for Lung Shiqi. He felt comfortable in his body, and then asked with a little doubt, "Master, do you know who that person was?" "Humph, he has been avoiding using the unique skills of the sect, but he still exposed that his cultivation method is 1,000 illusory sword tactics." 1,000 illusory sword tactics. He was from 1,000 illusory sword sect. Is he the mastermind behind the scenes mentioned by Ozu? Lung Shiqi thought and couldn't help glancing at Wuxia. However, Wuxia did not pay attention to him. Following that, Wuxia brought Lung Shiqi and left the southern god peak. Along the way, he did not mention a single word about Ozu, which made Lung Shiqi feel a little strange. He had prepared some excuses, but now he didn't need to use them at all. Suddenly remembered what had happened in the past. When he first arrived at the Donglin County branch, he had entered the tomb of Boi Wanhu. However, when he returned to the branch, the head of the Grand Pavilion, Ghost Ju, did not ask him where he had gone. Later, in the Demon Mountain Demon Use. In Demonic Demons, Feng Shamo knew that he had gone to the Demon Miasma Mountain Range. However, there was a beast tide in the Demon Miasma Mountain Range, followed by the Great Demon's Tribulation, and the Imperial Beast Abode and Blood Beast sect fighting there. The Blood Robe Pavilion definitely had this information, but Feng Shamo had never asked him about the Demon Miasma Mountain Range. After he entered the illusory spirit mystic realm as Wuqiu, everyone knew that Wuqiu had obtained the Divine Illusion Palace's cultivation method inheritance. But whether it was Feng Shamo or Wuxia, or even the upper echelons of the Blood Robe Pavilion, they had never mentioned the cultivation method, including his arrival at South Divine Peak. Although he had accepted the mission to assassinate Ozu, the upper echelons of the Blood Robe Pavilion knew that both of them had the Divine Illusion Palace's cultivation method. Now that he had disappeared for 3 months, not only did his cultivation soar to the 3rd level of the Spirit Vein realm, but he could also trigger the 7-colored light here. How could Wuxia not see it? Shouldn't Wuxia ask him if he had obtained Ozu's cultivation method? Did he have some kind of opportunity? Why was it completely different from the 1,000 illusion sword sect that Ozu was in? After he connected all of this together, he realized one thing. The Blood Robe Pavilion seemed to have given him a lot of freedom, as if they were letting him live. He could not ask where he went. He could also not ask what he had obtained. Even Wuxia had never given him any powerful spiritual skills or spiritual weapons. This was completely a method of letting him live. However, This method of letting him live still allowed him to reach the third level of the spirit vein realm at the age of 15. Lang Shiqi did not know why the upper echelons of the Blood Robe Pavilion would treat him like this, but this was a good thing for him. After all, his secrets could not withstand a strict investigation. With Wuxiang leading the way, they returned to the Blood Robe Pavilion in 3 days. Wuxiang did not stay idle along the way. He was nagging from beginning to end, saying that Lang Shiqi had made him lose face. This was the first time Lang Shiqi had spent so much time with Wuxiang. Only then did he know that he was so talkative. As soon as he returned to the Blood Robe Pavilion, Lang Shiqi remembered something. He took out the head of Oziu and said, "Master, Oziu has been killed by me. However, the deadline for the mission has passed. What should I do?" The reward for assassinating Oziu was not low. Just the blood drops alone were worth 300 points. It was a pity to give up just like that. Wuxiang took the head and casually looked at it. "It's a small matter. I'll help you arrange it." Lang Shiqi saw that Wuxiang did not doubt the authenticity of the head and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you, master. However, I want to give the blood drops for the mission to the Delta Origi. What do you think?" Who knew that before he could finish speaking, Wuxiang slapped Lang Shiqi on the shoulder. His shoulder vaguely made a crack sound. It was so painful that he grimaced. Fortunately, he was wearing a mask so that he would not make a fool of himself. Wuxiang's head came over and whispered, "You're amazing. You've already made a move on that little girl. Hee, don't worry. Master will fully support you in this matter. After this matter is done, you must steal a few of Bone Demon's consummate skills for me. As far as I know, Bone Demon has already passed the Ghost Bone Cold Fire Sword to the Delta Origi. You have to find a way to get it." Lang Shiqi. This topic could not continue, so he had to change the topic. "Master, there's still something I don't understand. Last time you said that you went to ask for an opportunity. What is it?" Speaking of this matter, Wuxiang's attitude suddenly became serious. He said, "This matter might have happened a few years later, but you and the girl Delta Origi broke through the spiritual pulse realm one after another, so it was brought forward. Your cultivation is now at the 3rd level of the spiritual pulse realm, so you're more confident." Lang Shiqi was immediately confused. However, he was keenly aware that this matter was probably related to the Blood Mist Island. "Master, what do you need me to do?" Wuxiang said solemnly, "You need to win a bet. You must win." Chapter 289. A bet. A bet that they had to win. Lang Shiqi's heart was filled with doubts. Wuxiang looked deeply at Lang Shiqi through the mask and said, "The sect spent hundreds of years of accumulation and countless energy to open up Blood Mist Island and nurture the 4 of you. But it's not for you to be assassins. Bloodcloth Pavilion doesn't lack assassins. It doesn't matter if the 4 of you are there or not. Each and every one of you has important responsibilities and tasks to carry out. You are the key to whether or not Bloodcloth Pavilion can break the shackles in the future. And this bet is the beginning of that matter." Lang Shiqi's eyes flashed. In the past, whether it was Feng Shamo or Gue Ju, they had said that the 4 of them were the key to breaking the deadlock of Bloodcloth Pavilion. He guessed what the deadlock of Bloodcloth Pavilion was. Bloodcloth Pavilion was a sword in someone else's hand and had severely limited the development of Bloodcloth Pavilion. It could also be said that many people in Bloodcloth Pavilion were no longer satisfied with just being a sword. Feng Shamo had clearly expressed this attitude in front of Lang Shiqi. But how could they break the deadlock? What were they going to do? What could the 4 of them do with their insignificant cultivation? He didn't know anything. He couldn't even guess. Now, this matter was finally about to surface. Wuxiang continued, "If you want to break the deadlock, the power of Bloodcloth Pavilion alone is too weak." "Weak and alone?" Lang Shiqi couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. Bloodcloth Pavilion was one of the top forces of the 7 absolutes in the world and had 5 Sky Origin Realm experts in the sect. With this, they dominated Muqin County and intimidated the entire Thunderblaze Empire. Even in the entire continent, their prestige spread far and wide. How could such a force be called weak and isolated? Have you heard of the 6 Directions Spirit Region? Wuxiang's question pulled Lang Shiqi back from his thoughts. Of course, he had heard of the 6 Directions Spirit Region. In the world sect ranking, the Four Saints Spirit region was ranked below the three great empires. The Four Saints Spirit region was the holy land in the hearts of countless spirit cultivators. It was said that tens of thousands of years ago, this continent was once ruled by a mysterious race, and the human race was completely like livestock. Later on, four supreme experts were born from the human race and overthrew the rule of the mysterious race. They also passed down the spirit cultivation lineage, allowing those with talent to cultivate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It could be said that the four supreme experts had not only saved the human race, but also created the path of spirit cultivation, and were respectfully called saints. Later on, the four saints went into seclusion and left behind their respective inheritances. That was the Four Saints Spirit region. In other words, the four sacred spirit realms had existed for more than 100,000 years. The amount of resources they possessed was simply unimaginable. However, the four sacred spirit realm had always been in a state of seclusion. Under normal circumstances, they would never appear in the outside world. However, once someone from the Four Saints spiritual realms appeared, their skills would shock everyone. And the Six Directions spiritual region that Wuxia spoke of was one of the four sacred spiritual regions. Lang Shiqi nodded to indicate that he understood. But why would Wuxia suddenly mention the Six Unity spiritual region? Wuxia said, most of the sects that can be ranked on the world sect ranking are top-notch powers, but not all of them are like this. For example, the three great empires and the four sacred spirit realms should be called transcendent powers. This time, our Blood Robe Pavilion has reached an agreement with a transcendent power like the Six Directions spiritual region. And whether or not these agreements can be finalized will depend on the four of you. When Lang Shiqi heard this, he could already faintly understand. The Blood Robe Pavilion wanted to break the deadlock, but they were still not strong enough, so they boarded the big ship of the Six Directions spiritual region. Combined with the gambling fight that Wuxia mentioned, he guessed that this gambling fight should be a gambling fight between the young disciples of both sides. Lang Shiqi and the other three were seen by the Blood Robe Pavilion as the key to breaking the shackles, but words were not proof. The Six Directions spiritual region had to see their true abilities. This gambling fight will be carried out by the four of you, and your opponents will be the middle-aged and young disciples of the Six Directions spiritual region. However, according to our requirements, the disciples sent by both sides cannot be older than 16 years old. According to what I know, the Six Directions spiritual region sent 2 disciples at the peak of the spirit transformation realm and 2 disciples who have just entered the spirit pulse realm. Their cultivation is the same as yours. However, the Six Directions spiritual region's inheritance is too long, and who knows how many ancient cultivation methods and spirit skills are hidden in it. Their combat strength is definitely not ordinary. Lang Shiqi suddenly felt a sense of pressure. In the top forces of the world sect ranking, disciples who broke through to the spirit pulse realm at the age of 25 were known as geniuses. For example, Bai Yi and Ozu were like this. However, in the Six Directions spiritual region, there were also 2 disciples who broke through to the spirit pulse realm before the age of 16. If this news were to be released, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. If the Six Directions spiritual region was like this, then what about the other 3 spiritual regions? Lang Shiqi felt that he was a frog at the bottom of a well in the past. He had been complacent because he had broken through to the spirit pulse realm early. However, now it seemed that it was nothing to the people of the 4 sacred spirit realms. In addition, the future of the Blood Robe Pavilion depended on this gambling fight, which was equivalent to putting pressure on the shoulders of Lang Shiqi and the others. How could he not feel pressure? However, you don't have to worry too much. Wuxia could see that Lang Shiqi was a little stressed. Although the disciples of the Six Directions spiritual region are not weak in cultivation and spirit skills, their combat experience is far inferior to yours. That's your biggest advantage. Lang Shiqi and the other 3 had experienced countless battles on Blood Mist Island. In terms of combat experience, they were far superior to the disciples of the Six Directions spiritual region who only knew how to cultivate. At this moment, Lang Shiqi felt an inexplicable excitement in his heart. The gambling fight is set for 10 days later. In these few days, Master will guide you well. Wuxia patted Lang Shiqi's shoulder. Of course, this time, it was very light. However, when Lang Shiqi heard this, the first thought that appeared in his mind was, so I have a master. After he became Wuxia's disciple, the 2 of them had met less than 5 times. Wuxia had never taught him anything. Now that Wuxia suddenly said that he would guide him, He felt a little flattered. Especially when he thought of the gang spirit realm master of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect who chased after him. He was actually killed by Wuxia with one slap, which showed how powerful Wuxia was. With such a person guiding him, he believed that his strength could be further improved in a short period of time. In that case, his chances of winning the bet would be even greater. Wuxia waved his hand and said, "Well, you know what happened. Go back and have a rest first. Tomorrow morning, go directly to the back mountain to find me." "Yes, I will leave first," Lang Shiqi said and walked to his small courtyard. However, Wuxia became sentimental, which was rare for him. Alas, 10 days later, it's up to you. Chapter 290. At dawn the next day, Lang Shiqi came to the back mountain of Wuxiang Palace. Wuxiang was already waiting here. Lang Shiqi came early because he was afraid he would be later than Wuxiang, but he was still late. Wuxiang said directly, "Next, I will suppress my cultivation to the early stage of the spirit pulse realm. You have to be determined to kill me and use your strongest spirit technique to kill me. If you can force me to move my body or use power beyond the early stage of the spirit pulse realm, you win." Lang Shiqi didn't speak. A heavy wooden spear appeared in his hand. This was the level 4 spirit tool Astral Wood Spirit Spear he bought at a high price. Holding the spear, Lang Shiqi's aura was unparalleled. The tip of his spear thrust forward, and the spear body suddenly drew a huge gray cross in the air as it rushed over. Lang Shiqi didn't test it and used the formation breaking cross spear right away. However, Formless only extended a finger and lightly flicked it. The cross-shaped light disappeared into nothingness, and the tip of the spear was stopped by Formless' finger. Brave and unparalleled, this spear is not bad. However, you didn't have the resolve to die when you charged into the enemy's formation, nor did you have the resolve to kill me. Therefore, you are still somewhat lacking. Lang Shiqi expected the formation-breaking cross spear to be easily broken, but it was also unexpected. What he didn't expect was that Wuxia would be able to break through his attack so easily. Moreover, his spear was a level 4 spirit weapon, yet it couldn't even hurt Wuxia's finger. He could clearly feel that Wuxia only used the power of the early stage of the spirit pulse realm. But how did he do it? This wasn't just perfect control of power, it also meant that Wuxia's body was terrifyingly strong. Lang Shiqi's body wasn't weak, but it wasn't enough in front of Wuxia. Since he was already close, Lang Shiqi put away his spear and punched. A tiger phantom pounced with the power to break rivers and sink oceans. Wuxia directly slapped away the tiger's shadow, and the invisible inner strength that entered his body did not have any reaction. Both inside and outside. Not bad, but the overall power is not enough. This was also a problem that Lang Shiqi had discovered. He was also trying to integrate Violent Lion's Fury Forest Fist into Tiger's Wave Stomping Fist. However, he had been studying swordsmanship and illusions in the secret realm and had not had the time to study the fist art. On the contrary, Falling Blossoms and Dazzling Blossoms had already merged together. Lang Shiqi's fist didn't work, so he used another palm. The 6 palms combined into 1.5 feet tall palm shadow with faint flame smashed down with a loud bang. The formless palm slashed downwards, instantly splitting the 6 yang poison fire palm into 2 halves before dissipating in mid-air. What a vicious palm strike. You have some skills. However, it's strong on the outside and weak on the inside. Once it encounters an extremely ferocious spiritual technique, it will collapse upon contact. Lang Shiqi had yet to discover the weakness of the 6 yang poisonous fire palm that Wuxia had mentioned. The follow-up of this palm strike could be strengthened from this aspect. Next, Lang Shiqi used Earth Fiend Demon Claw, Violent Lion's Fury Forest Fist, and Blood Sky Finger respectively. All of them were easily broken by Wuxia. However, when he used Blood Sky Finger, Wuxia muttered, "It's actually at the Great Perfection stage." He knew that Lang Shiqi had chosen this spiritual technique in the Blood Book Hall. At that time, he had also blocked Lang Shiqi there. Therefore, Wuxia also knew that Lang Shiqi had only used this spiritual technique for 3 months. To be able to cultivate a level 4 spiritual technique to the Great Perfection stage in 3 months, Lang Shiqi's comprehension surprised him. However, what he didn't know was that Lang Shiqi had only used a dozen breaths of time to cultivate Blood Sky Finger to the Great Perfection stage. Every time Wuxia broke a move, He would point out the weakness of the move. Lang Shiqi had fewer and fewer things that he could take out. Soon after, he retreated and his mental energy surged. His left hand lit up with faint starlight and then a giant ice sword nearly 2 feet long whistled out. What surprised Lang Shiqi was that Wuxiang also formed a spiritual seal with his hand and formed an even more powerful giant flame sword. Lang Shiqi's giant ice sword melted before it even got close. In the end, it turned into a cloud of mist like a moth to a flame. Wuxiang is also a spiritual caster. This was the first time Lang Shiqi knew of Wuxiang's ability. He couldn't help but be surprised, because he found that Wuxiang's spiritual technique, physical strength, and mental power were all very strong. This was very similar to him. It was also at this moment that Lang Shiqi vaguely felt that it wasn't a coincidence that Wuxiang took him as a disciple. But now was not the time to be distracted. He formed a series of seals and flames surrounded his body to form a giant pillar of fire that shot out. The giant flame sword collided with the pillar of fire and exploded. Waves of fire spread out and scorched the surrounding ground. When the waves of fire dissipated, Lang Shiqi was wearing a set of pitch-black demon armor. Wuxiang carefully looked at Lang Shiqi's demonic beast blood pattern armor. He felt traces of killing intent from Lang Shiqi. He nodded and said, "Interesting. You finally have the resolve to kill me." The black jade sword was unsheathed. The sharp blade of the level 5 spirit artifact spat out a glaring sword light. Lang Shiqi's spirit and mental power quickly circulated. His aura climbed higher and higher. When his aura reached its peak, Lang Shiqi suddenly disappeared. He suddenly disappeared in front of Wuxiang's eyes. At this moment, countless beautiful flower petals fell from the sky. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. But there was a huge killing intent hidden in these flower petals. Suddenly, the flower petals spun and shot towards Wuxiang. It turned out that each flower petal was a sword energy. Wuxiang murmured, "He actually pulled me into an illusion in an instant. Illusionary and real, real and fake. This move is not bad." At this moment, to Wuxiang's surprise, 36 phantoms appeared out of thin air and surrounded him. Each phantom was a sword light that intersected with the sword energy in the air. From afar, it formed the illusion of a giant flower. In an instant, the sword light raged and the sword energy rampaged. Chaotic flowers, dazzling eyes. Combining movement, sword energy, and illusion into one. This was the true chaotic flower's dazzling eyes. Wuxiang finally became cautious. He formed a sword with his finger and a sharp sword intense sword into the sky. Suddenly, countless invisible sword energy burst out and instantly destroyed all the phantoms and flower petals. But he still looked around vigilantly. He did not relax at all because he did not find Lang Shiqi's real body. The next moment, a long river of sword light broke out from the ground and stabbed at Wuxiang's chassis. "Insidious!" Wuxiang shouted in a low voice and pressed down with his palm. An invisible force pressed down, preventing Lang Shiqi's sword from moving forward. But at this moment, Lang Shiqi changed his sword for a sword. A cold sword light slashed out as if it was splitting the sky. Wuxiang felt a chill in his crotch and his whole body trembled. Chapter 291. Inside Wuxiang Palace, Lang Shiqi sat weakly on a chair while Wuxiang paced back and forth with lingering fear. Not long ago, he almost lost his little brother. Lang Shiqi's flash in the pan took more than 80% of his strength, but it also allowed Wuxiang to use strength that exceeded the early stage of the spirit pulse realm. In other words, Lang Shiqi won. However, ever since they came back, Wuxiang had been pacing back and forth. Lang Shiqi was a little dizzy, but he couldn't say anything. After a while, Wuxiang finally stopped and said to Lang Shiqi, "Master has nothing to teach you. As long as you can make up for the shortcomings I mentioned, you can at least beat one person." Lang Shiqi heard what he said. It seemed that this bet wasn't one-on-one, so he asked, "Master, what are the rules of the bet?" Wuxiang replied, "It's an arena battle. Whoever stands on the arena in the end will be the winner. If it was an arena battle, then there might be a situation of 1 versus 2, or even 1 versus 3. However, before Lang Shiqi could think about it, a gray-clothed disciple appeared outside the door. "Master Wuxiang, Delta Origi wants to see Lang Shiqi." "Delta Origi is here?" Lang Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. Wu Xiang immediately pulled Lang Shiqi and said, Tesdeske, you're quite capable. Don't forget what Master said. Get a few spirit techniques. Lang Shiqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he guessed that Delta Origi was here for the spirit techniques. After a while, Lang Shiqi brought Delta Origi back to his small courtyard. Delta Origi went straight to the point and said, The 300 drops of blood have been given to me. I'm here to fulfill my promise. Lang Shiqi said politely, If I hadn't accepted the mission to assassinate Ozu, causing a delay of 3 months, I'm afraid you would have already been promoted to a blood-clothed assassin. But if it weren't for this trip, I wouldn't have seen the heavenly phenomenon of the southern divine peak, and my cultivation wouldn't have advanced so quickly. You won't realize that there is such a big gap between us. At this point, Delta Origi's tone had a complicated meaning. Lang Shiqi knew that Delta Origi's competitive nature was showing again. In this trip to the southern divine peak with Delta Origi, the strength shown by Delta Origi was far inferior to that of Lang Shiqi, whether it was against Ozu or the pursuit of Gang Spirit Realm. Although Delta Origi was already very strong among the same level, she knew very well that the gap between them and Lang Shiqi was huge. Unknowingly, Lang Shiqi had left her in the dust. This made her very uncomfortable. This matter had instead become the motivation for Delta Origi to cultivate even harder. Now, she was no longer curious about the colorful world outside. She just wanted to improve her strength as soon as possible. Delta Origi continued, Before doing the mission, I promised to give you spiritual skills. But we've only done one mission, and I've already thought of a way to get the remaining blood drops, so I can only give you a 3rd-level spiritual skill as a reward. Okay. Lang Shiqi could accept it completely. He even felt that he had made a small profit. Delta Origi took out a piece of paper with the names of 4 spiritual skills written on it. Pick one. Lang Shiqi looked at it and asked, Why don't you just give me the secret manual of the spiritual skill? If that was the case, he could directly use his infinite skill points to learn it. That would be a huge profit. Although Delta Origi was wearing a mask, Lang Shiqi could feel that she was rolling her eyes at him. It's too troublesome to write them one by one. Besides, do you think I don't know that you have a photographic memory? You still want to take advantage of me. Lang Shiqi smiled embarrassedly. Fortunately, with the mask, he didn't make a fool of himself. Then, he carefully looked at the contents of the paper. The 4 spiritual skills on it were Triple Origin Cyan Spirit Sword, Impermanent Steps, Shifting Bone Technique, and Red Poison Curse. Lang Shiqi directly eliminated the first 2. He didn't need the 3rd-level blade and movement techniques at the moment, so he could only choose between the remaining 2. The Shifting Bone Technique was a spiritual skill that could slightly change one's body shape. Lang Shiqi had a human skin mask and a voice-changing technique. If combined with the Shifting Bone Technique, he could change into many different identities. It was a practical spiritual skill that could conceal one's identity. The Red Poison Curse was a spiritual skill that was similar to a curse. The reason why Lang Shiqi wanted this spiritual skill was because his centipede curse could no longer keep up with his cultivation. Before the 4th realm of heaven, the centipede curse was still very useful. However, for spirit cultivators in the spirit pulse realm, the centipede curse was easily suppressed. For example, the black-veiled woman last time, she only used a few breaths of time to suppress the centipede curse. He believed that she would be able to expel the centipede curse from her body in no time. Therefore, Lang Shiqi also wanted a spiritual skill that could control others. But after pondering for a while, he finally chose the Shifting Bone Technique. He wanted the Red Poison Curse, but he currently had the ability to control illusions, so he didn't need it. Moreover, he could use his blood droplets to exchange for this kind of spiritual technique. However, the Shifting Bone Technique was different. He often went out, so it was very important to conceal his identity. Moreover, this spiritual skill was probably related to the Bone Demon, so it probably couldn't be exchanged. Thus, Lang Shiqi said, I want the Shifting Bone Technique. Delta Origi said, I knew you would choose this. I've already prepared it for you. As she spoke, she took out a secret manual. This spiritual skill can't be taught to outsiders, but Master said that you performed well in the Southern God Peak, so he made an exception. Ha! Lang Shiqi didn't understand what the Bone Demon meant by performed well. However, since it was personally instructed by the Bone Demon, he felt even more at ease. I just started cultivating the shifting bone technique, so I don't have any insights to give you. Of course, I don't think you need it. By the way, although I believe you won't do this, I still have to say that you can't spread it. Of course, Leng Shiqi said seriously. Then he changed the topic. You should know about the bet. Speaking of this, Delta Origi's body tensed up. She said seriously, I know. This matter is very important. We can only win, not lose. Leng Shiqi said, you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself. The disciples of the Liuhe spiritual region have their advantages, but we also have advantages that they don't have. I understand what you're saying. This is also the method I mentioned before to obtain large amounts of blood drops. What do these two have to do with each other? Leng Shiqi couldn't help but be puzzled. Delta Origi said, of course it's related. If we win the bet, do you think we'll win for nothing? When the time comes, I'll ask the sect for blood drops. They'll definitely agree. This is indeed a method. Leng Shiqi nodded. He also wondered if he should ask for something if he won. Chapter 292. 10 days later, at the Bloodkill Hall. All the big shots of the Blood Robe Pavilion had arrived. The two pavilion elders, the pavilion leader, Hateful Blade, the vice pavilion leader, Ink Frost Ghost, and the disciplinary Grand Elder Bone Devil, were all present. Other than them, there were Formless, Leng Shiqi, Delta Origi, Yushu, and Hengming. After so many days, Leng Shiqi finally got to see Yushu and Hengming. Yushu was still the same black-robed assassin. He was currently wearing a mask that only revealed his eyes and winking at Leng Shiqi. As for Hengming, he still had that unapproachable expression on his face. It seems like they haven't changed much, Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He had thought that Yushu would change after becoming the pavilion master's personal disciple. He thought that Yushu would look down on him, the disciple of the underworld Bloodkill Pavilion. Then, Yushu would use his powerful cultivation to slap him in the face. But that was not the case at all. The four of them had stood out from tens of thousands of people. If they didn't even have that little bit of temperament, it would be a waste. Not long after, 5 people walked into the Bloodkill Hall. The one at the front was an old man with an elegant temperament. He didn't have the slightest bit of aura, but every step he took felt like he was stepping on the pulse of heaven and earth. It was as if he had become one with heaven and earth. Behind the old man were 4 youths, 3 boys and 1 girl. They all looked to be around 15 or 16 years old. The 4 of them looked left and right curiously, as if they rarely went out of the house. However, the cultivation bases of these 4 youths were extremely terrifying. 2 were at the peak of the spirit transformation realm, and 2 were at the spirit vein realm. They were the geniuses of the 6 direction spiritual zone, the opponents of Leng Shiqi and the others. After these people entered the Bloodkill Hall, Hateful Blade and the others stood up to welcome them. Only the 2 elders remained seated. Hateful Blade said, Elder Xiao, please excuse me for not going out to meet you. Elder Xiao said bluntly, we don't have much time. Let's begin. Hateful Blade didn't say anything. He used his palm as a blade and chopped down. With his palm as the center, ripples appeared in the space. Those ripples spread out, covering the entire Bloodkill Hall. Leng Shiqi was shocked to find that the surrounding scenery had suddenly changed into a grassland. He was stunned at first. Then, he rubbed the ground with his feet and realized that the grass and soil on the ground were all real. Huge waves of emotions surged in his heart. Changing space with a flip of his hand. What kind of heaven-defying ability was this? At this time, Elder Xiao also looked deeply at Hateful Blade, and a trace of fear flashed through his eyes. Those big shots didn't have any special reaction, but the 4 young men and women couldn't help but exclaim. Delta Origi and the others were also shocked, but they did not show it. Elder Xiao coughed lightly, and the 4 youths immediately restrained their expressions and calmed down. Hateful Blade said, let's do it here. You should be clear about the rules. Let the battle begin. As soon as Hateful Blade finished speaking, the atmosphere instantly became heavy. Yushu hugged a long blade and walked forward a few steps. He laughed and said, my name is Yushu, Yushu from Yushu. Who wants to exchange a few blows with me? His tone was full of frivolity, as if he didn't care about the other party at all. The 4 disciples of the Lyoha spiritual zone's expressions changed. Some of them even showed a trace of anger. Elder Xiao frowned slightly at first, but he immediately calmed down and didn't say anything. A young man in luxurious clothes walked up. His eyes were filled with anger as he said, "Humph, arrogant. I, Xiaofu, will let you know what it means to say that there is always someone better than you." This person was one of the spirit transformation disciples of the Lyoha spiritual zone, Xiaofu. The bracelet on his right wrist flashed slightly, and a gorgeous spirit blade appeared in his hand. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed. He had clearly seen that Xiaofu was using a mustard seed bracelet. A mustard seed bracelet was also a storage spirit tool, but its storage space was far greater than a mustard seed bag, and it was better at hiding. However, the value of a mustard seed bracelet was far greater than a mustard seed bag. Xiaofu was only at the spirit transformation realm, but he could wear a mustard seed bracelet. From this, it could be seen that the Lyoha spiritual zone's foundation was indeed very rich. Yushu's attention was completely focused on Xiaofu's spirit blade. The handle and blade of the blade were inlaid with light blue gems, and it looked very gorgeous. Yushu said, "You also use a blade." Sure, you can show me some moves." Xiaofu seemed to be even angrier. He didn't answer and directly attacked with his blade in anger. However, his blade aura was very ethereal. The light blue gems on the blade flickered endlessly, and then a blade light like a blue moon spilled out. This blade was stunning. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but secretly nod. Although Xiaofu's temperament wasn't very good, his strength was truly strong. This blade was actually somewhat similar to the waning moon rapid light slash he had first comprehended. However, the difference was that his waning moon rapid light slash pursued extreme sharpness, while Xiaofu's blade pursued ethereal intent. This kind of blade aura was inevitably a bit flashy. The blue moon fell, but Yushu didn't panic at all. He unsheathed his spirit blade and slashed out with a blade aura. However, his blade aura was strange and ruthless. It was like a storm that directly shattered Xiaofu's blue moon. Xiaofu's expression changed slightly. His blade aura immediately changed, becoming dignified and majestic. The 2 completely opposite blade auras continued to clash, and the spectators were a bit dazzled. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that overall, Xiaofu had the upper hand. Delta Origi asked Leng Shiqi, "Who do you think will win?" Leng Shiqi said, "Both of them are at the peak of the spirit transformation realm, but Xiaofu's cultivation method is clearly better than Yushu's. His spirit force is 30% stronger than Yushu's. In addition, Xiaofu's spirit technique and spirit blade are stronger than Yushu's. If this continues, Yushu will undoubtedly lose." "Then what do you mean? Yushu will win?" Delta Origi didn't understand. "You were the one who said Yushu was inferior to Xiaofu, and now you're the one who said Yushu will win?" Leng Shiqi whispered, "I know Yushu better than you do. Just watch." In the battle, Xiaofu continued to suppress Yushu. At this moment, Yushu was clearly at a disadvantage and even showed signs of defeat. Xiaofu's blade emitted a faint blue light. He found a flaw in Yushu's defense and slashed down. Puchi! Xiaofu's blade cut deeply into Yushu's shoulder. He sneered, "Aren't you arrogant? Try being arrogant again." Seeing this, the other 3 disciples of the 6 Unity spiritual realm all revealed expressions of relief. However, Yushu also smiled strangely. In the next moment, a saber had appeared in his left hand at some unknown time. Immediately after, a blade aura as fast as light slashed toward Xiaofu's throat. Chapter 293. Leng Shiqi had personally experienced Yushu's trick of exchanging injury for death. Xiaofu's saber was stuck in Yushu's flesh, and he thought that he had won, so he lowered his guard a lot. Unfortunately, the more dangerous it was, the more dangerous it was. Yushu's sudden attack was too fast for Xiaofu to react. Just as Yushu's blade was about to behead Xiaofu, Xiaofu's figure suddenly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he had appeared beside Elder Xiao. Elder Xiao said in a low voice, "Xiaofu has lost this round." Xiaofu was still in a state of shock. If Elder Xiao hadn't stepped in to save him, he would have been dead by now. However, he didn't understand. He was stronger than Yushu in every aspect, so how did he lose? No. If this wasn't a bet, but a fight to the death, he would already be dead. However, he still wasn't convinced. He still had a few powerful spirit techniques that he hadn't used, and he also had trump cards. These were all his methods to win. Elder Xiao's voice appeared in Xiao Fu's mind. You're the one who's really arrogant. Now do you understand how terrifying the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples are? Their cultivation methods, spirit techniques, and spirit artifacts may not be as good as yours, but they've all climbed out of a pool of blood. Their battle experience and ability to choose between life and death far exceed yours. At the same time, his voice also reached the ears of the other three people, and their expressions all became serious. Although Yushu had won, Xiao Fu's attack was very deep and almost cut off his right arm. At this moment, he used his spirit energy to seal the wound, but he didn't leave. He raised his head and said, "Who else?" Lang Shiqi couldn't help but admire Yushu when he heard that. Yushu's taunt skill was really maxed out. As for the other three Liuhe spiritual region disciples, their serious expressions were instantly replaced by anger. They had never been looked down upon like this before. When Elder Xiao saw this, he secretly sighed in his heart. The temperament of these few disciples was still a little lacking. Wuxia quietly stood on his tiptoes at the side. He seemed to be in a good mood. Another youth with a jade crown on his head from the Six Directions spiritual region walked over and said, "Six Directions spiritual region, Wan Rui. You're already heavily injured. You're no match for me. Admit defeat." Yushu grinned and said, "Even so, I can drag you down with me. Do you believe me?" Wan Rui appeared to be calmer than Xiao Fu, but he was also quite arrogant. He shook his head and said, "Stubborn. I only need one move to defeat you." He wasn't careless either. His hands became as translucent as jade, and with a slap of his palms, the force of 1,000 caddies came crashing down. Wan Rui actually wanted to use force to suppress others. Lang Shiqi also felt that Wan Rui's choice was correct. Yushu was already heavily injured, and there was no way he could defend himself. At this moment, Yushu closed his eyes. In less than an instant, he opened them again. Both of his eyes had turned pitch black, without the slightest bit of white in them. Black gas appeared on the blade in Yushu's left hand. He slashed out without any blade energy. Wan Rui thought that Yushu had given up on resisting, but this seemingly ordinary slash strangely passed through Wan Rui's arms and went straight for his head. Wan Rui was shocked. His hands released bursts of jade-colored spirit light. His hands suddenly doubled in size and grabbed Yushu's blade. His hands were filled with great power, and he was actually able to squeeze Yushu's blade until it cracked. However, Wan Rui couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Yushu wasn't lying. He really could drag him down with him. At the same time, Wan Rui's other hand slammed down and a glaring jade light surged. At this moment, Yushu had used up all his strength and no longer had the ability to resist. He could only quickly shout, "I admit defeat." Wan Rui's movements paused, but Yushu laughed sinisterly. "However, you used 2 moves, ha ha ha." Wan Rui's face was as ugly as if he had eaten a fly. He did say that he could defeat Yushu in 1 move, but in the end, he still used 2 moves. The people watching were either the higher-ups of both sides or the genius disciples. This made him feel a little embarrassed. Yushu walked back to Lang Shiqi's side and secretly gave himself a thumbs up. Elder Mu flicked his finger and a ray of green light entered Yushu's right shoulder. The originally terrible wound quickly healed in a few breaths of time. Yushu immediately touched his wound in amazement. Then, he immediately became lively again. He actually gave Wan Rui a thumbs up and then gestured down a few times. Wan Rui's eyes burned with anger when he saw this. He squeezed out a sentence through gritted teeth. The Blood Cloak Pavilion is one of the 7 absolutes, but its disciples are acting like this. What an eye-opener. However, the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were unmoved. The only one who moved was Xiaofan. He walked forward without saying anything. A pair of black fist blades appeared on his arms and killing intent rose in his eyes. Next was the battle between Xiaofan and Wan Rui. Wan Rui didn't dare to underestimate any of the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples now. He sized up Xiaofan. However, he suddenly realized that Xiaofan was just standing in front of him, but he had a feeling that he was going to ignore Xiongming. This very strange feeling made him feel a little uncomfortable. He said, "What is your name, sir?" Xiongming didn't answer his question. His body flashed, and his fist blades, which carried traces of demonic qi, arrived in front of Wan Rui. When Wan Rui saw Xiongming attack without even greeting him, he thought to himself, "The people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion are all crazy." However, he didn't slow down. His hands shone with layers of jade light, and he suddenly slapped out with a magnificent aura. With a ding, Xiongming's fist blades clashed with Wan Rui's jade-like hands, producing a clanging sound. Xiongming's body moved again. He constantly moved around Wan Rui, constantly looking for an opening. Wan Rui, on the other hand, used defense as offense. He relied on the strength of his jade-like hands to deal with all kinds of changes. Xiongming was very fast, but Wan Rui was strong enough to defeat all of them. Every time they clashed, Wan Rui had a slight advantage. If this continued, Xiongming would probably be exhausted and defeated. However, Lang Shiqi, Delta Origi, and Yushu weren't in a hurry. They all knew that among the four of them, Xiongming was the one who was best at hiding his strength. He probably had some kind of backup plan. After another attack, Xiongming was forced to retreat. This had happened several times already, and Wan Rui was getting a little impatient. At that moment, an almost undetectable wisp of blood hidden in the demonic qi silently shot towards Wan Rui. He only just noticed it when it was about to touch him. Lang Shiqi was slightly surprised to see that wisp of blood. It was the Line Blood Heavenly Finger. Xiongming had also cultivated the Line Blood Heavenly Finger, and judging from the speed of the wisp of blood, he had already mastered the technique. This sudden wisp of blood caught Wan Rui off guard. He reached out with one hand, wanting to crush the wisp of blood. However, the most powerful thing about the Line Blood Heavenly Finger was its penetrative power. The wisp of blood pierced through his jade-like hands, but his jade-like hands had already dimmed. Wan Rui secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that a cloud of demonic qi appeared behind him, and a figure emerged from it. It was Xiongming. Another Xiongming. Chapter 294. Another Meng Ming had appeared behind Wan Rui, but Wan Rui didn't notice it at all. Lang Shiqi was a little stunned as well because he couldn't tell which one was the real body of the infernal underworld. His eyes under the mask turned white, and he was able to tell that the Meng Ming behind Wan Rui was the real one. Wuxia muttered, "Ink Frost Ghostly Being even taught the underworld ghost clone. Yushu learned the Death Intent Strike, and Delta Origi learned the Ghost Bone Ice Fire Sword. TSK. It seems like I'm the only one who didn't teach Lang Shiqi anything." His voice wasn't loud, but he was close to Lang Shiqi, so Lang Shiqi heard what he said. Lang Shiqi was speechless. The scene of the battle naturally fell into the eyes of the people from the 6 Unity spiritual region. They could only watch, but they could not say anything. Once they reminded Wan Rui, it would mean that they had lost. Wan Rui looked at the blood sky finger that had blocked a sliver of the blood sky finger, and then saw the infernal underworld stabbing towards him. Finally, he stopped defending. He took a step forward, and a powerful aura rushed toward him, blowing his hair. Yushu yelled, "Half-step Spirit Pulse Realm." That's right, the aura Wan Rui was displaying was the aura of someone who had transformed their sea of qi into a spiritual sea. He only needed to open one more Spirit Pulse to reach the Spirit Pulse Realm. So Wan Rui had been hiding something. Wan Rui clapped his hands, and a violent wave of palm energy rushed out, shattering the Meng Ming in front of him into a cloud of black mist. Wan Rui paused for a moment, and then he felt a chill behind him. He turned around, and the other Meng Ming behind him was surrounded by demonic qi, which condensed into 8 spider-like demonic spikes that stabbed at his vital points. Wan Rui yelled, and his body lit up with a faint jade glow, but he was too late. The demonic qi of the Meng Ming easily tore through his jade glow, and just as it was about to kill him, Wan Rui took out a jade stone from his mustard seed bracelet. At this moment, Elder Xiao said, "We admit defeat." "Elder, I haven't lost yet." Wan Rui held the jade stone in his hand and said unwillingly, "Enough, come here." Wan Rui didn't dare to disobey Elder Xiao's words, so he could only leave the stage. This also meant that he had lost. But he felt that he hadn't lost. Haven't you noticed that Hungming has been trying to get you used to his attack rhythm? He did it on purpose. From the beginning to the end, all of your reactions were under the control of others, but you were completely unaware of it. I am very disappointed. Elder Xiao's words entered his mind, causing his entire body to tremble. In his battle with Meng Ming, he had indeed thought that Meng Ming was the kind of person who was skilled in movement techniques and flexible in his attacks. Indeed, he had slowly figured out Hungming's tactics. Initially, he thought that he would be able to win if he played it safe. However, Tong Ming's blood heavenly finger suddenly changed. For Wan Rui, the power of this move was not very strong, so he blocked it. But what he never expected was that the blood heavenly finger was only a means to attract his attention. It was all for the sake of unleashing the real killer move without anyone noticing, that strange shadow. Thinking of this, Wan Rui looked at Hungming with a trace of shock. His direct combat strength was much higher than Hungming's, and he also had trump cards that he hadn't used, but he had still lost. He had lost to Hungming's battle rhythm. At this moment, Hungming's face was deathly pale, and his body was slightly swaying. However, a trace of fear appeared in Wan Rui's heart. The Blood Robe Pavilion had won 2 battles in a row, which made the people of the Six Directions spiritual region feel a little incredulous. Before coming, Xiao Fu and Wan Rui had come with the mentality that they would definitely win. Although the Six Directions spiritual region and the Blood Robe Pavilion were both on the world sect ranking, they had never really taken the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion seriously. In fact, they even wanted to have fun on this trip. However, now that Xiao Fu and Wan Rui had been defeated in a row, it was equivalent to a slap in the face. Fortunately, this was an arena battle, not a one-on-one battle. As long as the final victor was one of their people, the Six Directions spiritual region would still win. Therefore, the most important thing was still to see the battle between the Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators. After winning, Hungming didn't continue to stay like Yushu. Instead, he directly walked back. He knew that the next battle would be between the Spirit Pulse Realm cultivators, so there was no need for him to continue fighting. I'll go first. At this moment, Delta Origi's voice sounded. Then, she lightly stepped forward and stood upright. The remaining 2 people from the Six Directions spiritual region were a man and a woman. They discussed in low voices for a moment, and the young girl also went up to fight. This young girl didn't use any spiritual power, but she gave off a lively feeling just by standing there. She said in a crisp voice, "Yun Meng Si." Delta Origi. Delta Origi? What a strange name. Yun Meng Si tilted her head slightly and muttered. Delta Origi couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with her. All the bones in her body creaked, and her hair turned silver white. Her aura then skyrocketed. Then, she spun the bone sword in her hand and ignited layers of ghost fire. Netherworld chi spread out in all directions. Delta Origi didn't probe at all. She actually used such a powerful spiritual technique right from the start. Yun Meng Si's beautiful face changed slightly, but she didn't panic. Her hands flew like flowers, forming one spiritual seal after another. It was full of beauty. She was actually a spiritual caster. A spiritual caster of the Spirit Pulse realm. Spiritual casters would undergo a qualitative change after entering the 4 realms of the Sky Realm. If they were compared to other cultivators of the same cultivation, their fighting strength would definitely be extraordinary. In the blink of an eye, dozens of wind blades suddenly appeared behind Yun Meng Si. On each wind blade, there was a strange mark that faintly flashed. The wind blades trembled slightly and emitted a wang-wang sound. Then, she lightly tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and floated backwards. At the same time, the dozens of wind blades whistled out. The wind blades sliced through the air and emitted ear-piercing sounds. However, Delta Origi turned a deaf ear to them. The bone sword in her hand waved out sword shadows, shattering the wind blades one after another. Then, the ghost fire on her bone sword flourished. A faint death chi rose up and pervaded the surrounding area. She waved her arm and slashed out a glaring ghost fire sword beam. Yun Meng Si had been locking her fingers together. Around her, 3 differently colored spheres of light emerged, each releasing a different sense of power. One was as sharp as gold, one was as hot as fire, and one was as heavy as a mountain. Finally, they formed the gold, fire, and mountain imprints respectively. The mountain imprint lit up first. Immediately, A faint yellow light spread out and suppressed the death chi. Then, the gold imprint flickered incessantly. Layers of gold light shields appeared in front of Yunmeng-Si, blocking Delta Origi's sword beam. Finally, the fire imprint trembled and fire arrows shot out one after another. However, Delta Origi didn't dodge. The ghost fire and the flame collided and easily destroyed all the fire arrows. While Yunmeng-Si was stunned, Delta Origi had already approached her. In front of my ghost bone cold fire sword, ordinary flames don't deserve to exist. Delta Origi stabbed out. It seemed like only one stab, but in fact, she had stabbed out dozens of times in an instant. So many sword shadows overlapped, gathering an unimaginable power. Yunmeng-Si's red lips slightly opened and said a strange word. Nah. Then, the three imprints around her began to twist rhythmically. Gradually, the three imprints merged into one. A terrifying wave of spiritual energy rippled out. A golden spear as heavy as Mount Tai and burning with raging flames appeared out of nowhere. Yunmeng-Si actually held the spear in her hand and swept out. The surrounding 200 to 300 feet was instantly covered by a dense golden light. Waves of violent waves swept over everyone. Yushu and the other spirit transformation realm disciples turned pale and retreated. Elder Xiao and Wu Xiang both took action to protect their disciples. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed. Yunmeng-Si's strength was indeed a little beyond his expectations. This was the true combat strength that the disciples of the Six Directions spiritual zone should have. However, he wasn't worried about Delta Origi at all. Because when the light dissipated, Delta Origi's figure was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 295. When all the light dissipated, Delta Origi's figure strangely disappeared. Yunmeng-Si's heart tightened. Shortly after, wisps of willow, the wisp sword light suddenly appeared above her head, forming a sword net that descended upon her. Yunmeng-Si's expression finally changed. However, an exquisite bell appeared on her wrist. She shook it lightly, and a crisp sound rang out. Layers of sound waves visible to the naked eye surged out, forming a semicircular spiritual shield. The sword net fell, and the ghost fire swords continuously cut at the spiritual shield, producing an extremely ear-piercing sound. The sound wave spiritual shield kept on twisting, but it still managed to forcibly take on the sword net. Yushu immediately shouted, "Cheating, she's cheating! There's something strange about this bell." If Yushu could see it, so could the others. When Yunmeng-Si took out the bell, Leng Shiqi noticed that there was a spiritual technique sealed within the bell. In other words, the sound shield that protected Yunmeng-Si just now wasn't her spiritual technique, but an ability that came with the bell. However, this couldn't be considered cheating. It could only be said that her spiritual tool was exquisite enough. At this moment, Delta Origi's figure strangely appeared beside Yunmeng-Si. Just as she was about to launch a sneak attack, Yunmeng-Si smiled proudly. Leng Shiqi instantly had a bad feeling. Sure enough, a circular spiritual formation instantly appeared under Yunmeng-Si's feet, and countless needle-like streams of water appeared. The streams of water swept out like a storm, as if they wanted to swallow Delta Origi whole. Water countered fire. Yunmeng-Si knew that Delta Origi's ghost bone-chilling fire was incomparably powerful, so she used the endless streams of water to break it. Facing so many streams of water, even Delta Origi couldn't dodge. Since she couldn't dodge, then she wouldn't dodge. A bloodline quietly appeared on Delta Origi's blade. That was the spiritual technique that came with the Seven Fiends art, Carnage Blood. As soon as the bloodline appeared, the ghost fire was instantly dyed into blood flames. Blood flames appeared in the world, and blood fiendish energy spread out. Delta Origi stabbed out with her sword, and in a split second, blood energy soared into the sky, almost wiping out all the water currents. However, there was still a lapse in concentration, and several streams of water still pierced her body. Fortunately, the impact was not great. Up until now, both Delta Origi and Yunmeng-Si had used their trump cards one after another, but neither side could do anything to the other. If they continued to fight like this, they would only be able to compete in terms of spiritual power. Perhaps, Yunmeng-Si's cultivation method was slightly better than Delta Origi's, but Delta Origi's cultivation was indeed at the peak of the first level of Spirit Pulse realm. Therefore their powers were almost the same. How long would that take? Moreover, there was still a battle coming up. If they could preserve some of their spiritual energy, they might be able to exhaust a portion of their opponent's spiritual energy. At this moment, both of them had the same thought, and that was to decide the outcome of the battle with one move. Delta Origi's originally thin body suddenly became even more delicate, but her aura had already reached the second level of the spirit pulse realm. Blood flames rose around her body as her fighting spirit soared higher and higher. A mystical imprint appeared on Yun Mengxi's forehead, and boundless spiritual power surged continuously. She quickly formed hand seals, and every time she formed a spiritual seal, a few streams of light would gather above her head. Gradually, the shadow of a small palace appeared there. Both of them were accumulating power and waiting to attack. The first to move was still Delta Origi. Her bone sword trembled, and let out a hiss. The dense blood fiendish energy and blood flames fused together, and suddenly, a blood-colored sword light slashed out like a waterfall. Yun Mengxi pushed her hands forward, and the shadow of the palace in midair let out a pleasant sound. That sound contained an invisible power, and instantly dispersed a portion of the blood fiendish energy. Then, the shadow of the palace bloomed with a boundless light, and a sound that didn't seem to belong to the mortal world came out. That sound seemed to come from the ancient times, and it shook the heavens and earth, suppressing everything. Delta Origi's blood-colored waterfall was actually shaken to the point that it almost dissipated from the illusory sound of the blade. Then, Delta Origi suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. She wasn't injured, but she spat it out on her own accord. That was her blood essence. The blood all fell onto the bone sword, and suddenly, a ferocious blood aura rose into the air. The blood-colored waterfall expanded by a large amount, and tore the shadow of the palace apart. The blood-colored waterfall didn't lose its momentum, and it slashed towards Yun Mengxi. However, an arm suddenly appeared from the shadow of the palace. It waved lightly, and the huge blood-colored waterfall instantly shattered like a bubble. Delta Origi was hit by the blood essence backlash, and she spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Her body returned to its original state, but she swayed and almost fainted. At this time, a figure held her shoulder, and she didn't fall. While Yushu shouted angrily, "Do you still want your face?" That arm clearly didn't belong to her. What Yushu said could be seen by everyone present. The power emitted by that arm had far surpassed the power of a spiritual pulse realm cultivator, and even the power of a spiritual aperture realm cultivator. That definitely wasn't Yun Mengxi's own power. If Yun Mengxi really had such power, the Blood Robe Pavilion would have just admitted defeat. What was the point of fighting? Before this, Yun Mengxi had used that bell, which was more or less acceptable. But this time, it was true that he had cheated. The 5 Sky Origin Realm cultivators of the Blood Robe Pavilion, including Wuxia, all took a step forward. They didn't say anything, but their meaning was obvious. Elder Xiao also sighed helplessly. Yun Mengxi is a genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. It's normal for her to have some tricks up her sleeve to protect her. It's just that I didn't think that she would be forced out in the middle of the battle. Why don't we call it a draw? A draw! If that arm hadn't appeared, Delta Origi would have already won. Why would they call it a draw? The people of the Blood Robe Pavilion were naturally unwilling. Pavilion Master Hateful Blade said, "You and I are both in the Sky Origin realm. Can't you see the direction of the battle?" Delta Origi won. Elder Xiao shook his head and said, "That might not be the case. Yun Mengxi is also proficient in several spiritual formations, which can be activated in an instant. Even if there were no external objects to stop her, she wouldn't have lost. Therefore a draw is the best result." Elder Xiao wants to fight on paper? Hateful Blade's words had a hint of sarcasm. Elder Xiao was actually feeling very bitter. They were indeed in the wrong, but if Yun Mengxi lost, their 6-direction spiritual region would have lost 3 matches in a row. Even if they won the last match, it would be hard to explain when they returned. However, at this moment, Lang Shiqi, who was supporting Delta Origi, said something that shocked everyone. Delta Origi lost this match. What? Yushu exclaimed. Xiongming also looked at Lang Shiqi in surprise. Even the disciples of the 6-direction spiritual region had expressions of disbelief. However, Lang Shiqi looked at Yun Mengxi with a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. Chapter 296. The reason why Lang Shiqi said this was because regardless of whether it was a draw or a win for Gusan, Yun Mengsi would still participate. Lang Shiqi didn't want her to step down. Delta Origi sensed Lang Shiqi's murderous intent and said, "I admit defeat." This. Yushu and the others looked at each other. Yun Mengsi was obviously cheating, but they couldn't say that Delta Origi would win. Therefore, it wasn't unacceptable for this battle to be considered a draw. However, Delta Origi admitted defeat, which confused Yushu and Hungming. As for Hateful Blade and the others, they remained silent. Since Delta Origi admitted defeat, they could only accept it silently. Formless crossed his arms and looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. Lang Shiqi whispered to Delta Origi, "Go and rest. Leave the rest to me." Delta Origi didn't force herself this time and nodded obediently. After Delta Origi left, Lang Shiqi's eyes turned colder and colder. He said, "I am Lang Shiqi. Please enlighten me." Yun Mingxi also thought that it would be best for her and Delta Origi to end up in a draw. She wasn't confident that she could defeat Delta Origi, but she also didn't think that she would lose. Therefore, when Delta Origi admitted defeat, she couldn't help but be stunned. What surprised her more was that Lang Shiqi made this decision for Delta Origi. Delta Origi actually did this. What was their purpose in doing this? Yun Mingxi couldn't figure it out. However, when she saw Lang Shiqi's ice-cold gaze, she felt a chill in her heart that went straight to her soul. She vaguely understood what was going on. Lang Shiqi didn't hesitate at all. He raised his right arm and 36 demonic patterns appeared. After the spiritual pulse realm, one could condense 9 demonic patterns every time they broke through a realm. The 36 demonic patterns made Lang Shiqi feel like his arm was filled with explosive power. He stretched out his 5 fingers and his palm turned into a pitch-black demonic claw. In an instant, demonic aura rose around him and a demonic claw half the height of a human formed. Earth Fiend Demonic Claw. Yun Mingxi didn't dare to be distracted. She quickly formed a hand seal, and as her spirit energy flashed, flames and golden light flashed. The demonic claw tore the flames and shattered the golden light, but it also dissipated into nothingness. Lang Shiqi was also a spirit caster, so he naturally knew the weakness of spirit casters, which was that there was a short buffer period between spirit techniques. The reason he used the Earth Fiend Demon Shadow Claw was not to injure Yun Mengxi in the first place. Instead, it was to take advantage of this momentary gap. Before the claw shadow completely dissipated, Lang Shiqi punched out. The shadow of a ferocious tiger suddenly jumped out and pounced forward. Yun Mingxi didn't expect Lang Shiqi to attack so quickly. She didn't have time to form a hand seal. Mental energy surged between her eyebrows, and a green formation suddenly appeared in front of her. Layers upon layers of green light intertwined, like the roots of a towering tree overlapping with each other. The green light blocked the shadow of the tiger, but the internal energy within it went through the green light and attacked Yun Mingxi. Yun Mingxi immediately felt a huge force coming at her, but her clothes flashed with spirit light to dissolve the internal energy. She only took a few steps back. What shocked her was that Lang Shiqi had appeared beside her without her noticing. Lang Shiqi used his palm as a knife. In an instant, hundreds of knife auras shot out, killing everything in their path. Yun Mingxi still didn't have time to form a hand seal. She spat out another word. Boom! Something strange happened. The air seemed to vibrate rhythmically, shattering the knife auras one after another. Lang Shiqi's 3 consecutive attacks didn't yield any obvious results. The other 3 disciples of the Lyoha spiritual zone smiled. Only Elder Xiao frowned more and more. In fact, Lang Shiqi was also a little surprised. Yun Mingxi was proficient in the Spirit Seal style, the Spirit Incantation style, and the Spirit Formation style. She was indeed a rare genius. But she had to pay the price today. Yun Mingxi had just shattered the knife auras when another 5 bloodlines shot out. Each bloodline was condensed to the extreme and aimed at her fatal spots. This was also the Blood Heavenly Finger, but it was performed by a Spirit Pulse Level 3 cultivator. It was the Blood Heavenly Finger of the Perfection stage. Ah! Yun Mingxi suddenly screamed in the face of danger. Violent mental energy surged out. At this moment, she had no choice but to overdraw her mental energy. She didn't form a hand seal this time. Instead, the shadow of the palace appeared in the air again. But what she didn't know was that Lang Shiqi had been waiting for this moment. Lang Shiqi's eyes flickered with a strange light. One of his eyes was enough to shake people's hearts and souls. The other eye looked lifeless, but it contained the terror of life and death. He performed the soul-scaring technique and the mind-stealing technique at the same time. Originally, this level 3 illusory technique was almost useless against a spirit pulse realm cultivator like Yun Mingxi. But Yun Mingxi had already exhausted a lot of her mental energy in the fierce battle with the Delta Origi. Now, Lang Shiqi was forcing her to overdraw her mental energy. This way, although she could explode with powerful mental energy for a short period of time, she wouldn't be able to resist the illusory technique. The shadow of the palace above Yun Mingxi's head had just taken shape, but it suddenly disappeared. Even Yun Mingxi herself stood there in a daze, motionless. Lang Shiqi formed a sword with his fingers. Dozens of invisible channel unblocking sword auras shot out and pierced into Yun Mingxi's body mercilessly. Not only did the channel unblocking sword auras leave wounds all over her body, but they also caused blood vessels to appear all over her body. More than half of the meridians in her body were sealed. This time, she was really in a situation where she was bound to lose. Seeing this scene, Elder Xiao sighed inwardly. However, it was already very good that Yun Mingxi could hold on until now. On the other hand, the other 3 people had yet to recover from Yun Mingxi's sudden defeat. Just a moment ago, the 2 of them were still fighting back and forth. Seeing that Yun Mingxi was about to explode, she suddenly froze. They had all subconsciously thought that Lang Shiqi was a martial artist, so they had overlooked the possibility of an illusory technique. However, to everyone's surprise, Lang Shiqi did not stop there. His eyes suddenly shone with a terrifying murderous intent. He struck out 6 palms and the 6 palms combined into one. Instantly, a huge palm of demonic flames came crashing down. There was only one ending for a defenseless martial artist when faced with such a palm, and that was death. Elder Xiao was immediately enraged. "How dare you?" Just as he was about to intervene, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. It was Hateful Blade. "Elder Xiao, the battle is not over yet. If you intervene, it will be equivalent to admitting defeat." Hateful Blade's sudden appearance shocked Elder Xiao. He said in a low voice, "I admit defeat on behalf of Yun Mingxi." Bang! However, Lang Shiqi's 6 solar poisonous fire palms still struck Yun Mingxi's body. The boundless power of the palm and the sinister demonic flames engulfed her. Fortunately, she finally regained some consciousness at the last moment. Spiritual light flashed on her clothes continuously and blocked a portion of the power of the palm. Even so, she was still sent flying. Furthermore, the poisonous fire attacked her heart and she immediately spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. The scorching flames burned her clothes and seared her hair. She was in a pitiful state. After falling to the ground, she immediately fainted. At this moment, Lang Shiqi suddenly slapped his head regretfully and said, "Oh no, Elder Xiao was a little slow. I did not stop in time." Chapter 297. Elder Xiao's face was completely gloomy. He shouted in a low voice, "Is the Blood Garment Pavilion trying to ruin the bet this time?" The threat in his words was obvious. If Hen Dao hadn't stopped him just now, he could have saved Yun Mingxi at any time. It was obvious that Hen Dao's actions were intentional. However, Hen Dao said, "The disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion have always followed the rules in the competition. Yun Mingxi didn't admit defeat, so Lang Shiqi continued to attack. No matter how you look at it, we are in the right." Elder Xiao shook his head secretly. This was back to the matter of Yun Mingxi being forced to use her protective trump card. The 6 direction spiritual region was indeed in the wrong, and because of this, the Delta Origi was seriously injured. However, he was the one who brought Yun Mingxi here. Now that she was in such a state, it would be difficult for him to report back. At this time, Wuxia cursed at Lang Shiqi. "You little bastard. How dare you be so heavy-handed to a disciple of the 6 direction spiritual region? She's a girl. Why don't you know how to be gentle with her?" His voice was very loud, but there was no hint of blame in his tone. Lang Shiqi also said very cooperatively, "Elder Xiao, fellow disciples of the 6 direction spiritual region, I'm not good enough and didn't stop for a moment. Please forgive me." Elder Xiao knew that the Blood Garment Pavilion was giving him a way out. He also knew that the six-direction spiritual region and the blood garment pavilion joining forces was the region master's idea. As an elder, he actually didn't have much authority. In the end, he could only use silence to cover this matter. He didn't pay any attention to Leng Shiqi. Instead, he helped Yun Mengxi up and fed her a pill. Miraculously, Yun Mengxi woke up in an instant, and the fire poison in her body was also cleansed. After Yun Mengxi woke up, the first thing she looked at was Leng Shiqi, and the expression in her eyes was unusually complicated. Leng Shiqi didn't look at Yun Mengxi. Instead, he looked at the last youth. He was the person from the six-direction spiritual region who hadn't made a move yet. As long as they defeated him, the blood garment pavilion would win. This youth had a strong physique and a resolute face. His body was full of vitality, and it was obvious that he had also cultivated a body refining technique. He walked over with a crimson spear in hand, his battle intent surging. Leng Shiqi's expression froze. He could feel that this was a formidable opponent. Six-direction spiritual region, Gongye Mingxiu. As Gongye Mingxiu stood there, his entire body seemed to have fused with the long spear. He didn't make any movements, but he gave off an extremely dangerous feeling. As Leng Shiqi had exposed many of his moves during the fight with Yun Mengxi just now, he decided to observe the situation and test Gongye Mingxiu's actual strength first. Gongye Mingxiu didn't hold back as well. He shook the spear in his hand, and there were actually traces of lightning flowing on it. After that, the lightning spear suddenly whipped over like a whip. Although this spear technique was a spear technique, there seemed to be a hint of a staff technique within it. It was extremely ferocious. Leng Shiqi took a deep breath. Using the spirit steps, he flew backward quickly, and at the same time, he unleashed a few frost sword energies to neutralize the wind generated by the spear. Bang! Gongye Mingxiu stomped on the ground with one foot, and his body shot out like a sharp arrow that had left the bow. He thrust his spear forward, and the body of the spear blossomed with a crimson light. It smashed down from the sky like a red sun, and its imposing manner was extremely shocking. Leng Shiqi didn't dodge this time. The astral wood spirit spear appeared in his hand as well. Then, his eyes widened slightly, and his entire body emitted an imposing manner of charging into enemy lines alone. Charging into enemy lines would only lead to death. He thrust his spear forward like Gongye Mingxiu, but the difference was that the tip of his spear drew out a huge cross of spirit light. The crimson sun was cut apart by the cross of spirit light, and the tips of the two spears collided with each other accurately. Instantly, an ear-piercing sound of collision was heard. Then, an invisible force spread out from the tip of the spear, and it stirred up gusts of wind. Leng Shiqi immediately felt an enormous force pass from the body of the spear to his arm, and it shook him to the point that the web between his thumb and forefinger cracked, and his arm went numb. The strength of Gongye Mingxiu's body was actually stronger than his. On the other hand, Gongye Mingxiu retreated 2 steps, and he was even more shocked in his heart. After this attack, he could feel that his body was stronger than Leng Shiqi's, and his spirit spear was better than Leng Shiqi's. His spirit techniques weren't inferior to Leng Shiqi's either. However, while he retreated 2 steps, Leng Shiqi didn't retreat. He was actually at a disadvantage in this attack. He found it hard to understand. He also somewhat understood the difficulties of Xiao Fu and Wan Rui. However, Elder Xiao saw through the reason behind this. It was because Leng Shiqi's spear thrust was filled with the will to die, and Gongye Mingxiu had always treated this as a competition. Unknowingly, his imposing manner had already fallen to a disadvantage. Not only him, but the 3 people from before were also the same. However, Elder Xiao didn't have any intention of blaming them. He also knew that this had always been the drawback of the Lyoha spiritual region's disciples. In fact, their disciples didn't lack battle experience, and they would often spar and compete with each other. However, the blood clothing pavilion's disciples had all climbed out of a sea of blood and piles of corpses. Facing such an opponent, Gongye Mingxiu and the others' biggest weakness was that they didn't have the experience of fighting with their lives on the line. When Wu Xiang saw Leng Shiqi's spear, he muttered with satisfaction, "He's improved a little." After his attack failed, Gongye Mingxiu let out a low roar and began a frenzied attack. Every thrust of his spear was wide open, and the spear was filled with flames and traces of lightning. Its power was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, Lang Shiqi was forced to retreat again and again. Under the sky full of spear shadows, Lang Shiqi was like a small boat in a huge wave, and could capsize at any time. Lang Shiqi naturally couldn't continue like this. Then, he unsheathed his inky jade sword, and his sword swept out like a river. Streaks of dark green sword light and spear shadows constantly clashed, and countless sparks were created. It was even more dazzling. All of a sudden, Lang Shiqi's sword style changed. It became soft and gentle like a gentle breeze brushing the willows. The two completely opposite sword styles were instantly switched in his hands, causing Gongye Mingshu, who had already adapted to Lang Shiqi's attack rhythm, to have an unusual feeling of suffocation. However, his reaction wasn't slow either. His spear style also changed, and became like a long whip. However, Lang Shiqi's sword style changed again. Sometimes it was fierce, sometimes it was light, sometimes it was as fast as a rainbow, and sometimes it was as slow as a willow catkin. This was the great perfection of the 17 sword styles of Mount Song, and it was vividly displayed by Lang Shiqi with his 5th-level spirit sword. The constantly changing sword style made Gongye Mingshu a little overwhelmed. Although he was also good at different spear styles, he certainly couldn't be as free and flexible as Lang Shiqi when switching between styles. Gradually, Lang Shiqi suppressed Gongye Mingshu. Gongye Mingshu knew that he couldn't continue like this. He swatted away Lang Shiqi's inky jade sword with his spear. Then, his expression turned serious, and he formed a mystical spirit seal with one hand. What was even stranger was that the spirit seal was actually imprinted on his own body. Immediately, blazing flames and tyrannical lightning surged around Gongye Mingshu's body. He stood there safe and sound, like a Balrog or thunder god. Chapter 298. Gongye Mingshu suddenly erupted with such a powerful aura, causing everyone to be slightly shocked. Xiaofan said coldly, "Humph, that Lang Shiqi can force senior brother Gongye to use the Crimson Thunder insight. He's quite capable, but that's it." Wan Ruei added, "That's right. Senior brother Gongye's cultivation is comparable to the middle stage of the spiritual pulse realm. Lang Shiqi will definitely lose." Only Yun Mengxi didn't speak. She knew that Lang Shiqi could use illusions to temporarily control her, a spirit caster. It was obvious that Lang Shiqi's mental strength was extremely powerful. Moreover, he was also good at illusions. She had to be careful. Unfortunately, before Gongye Mingshu stepped forward, she hadn't completely woken up and forgot to remind him. If she said it now, it would be considered cheating again. Lang Shiqi's mind moved, and his body was instantly covered in a set of ferocious armor that looked like a giant demon. His aura suddenly soared to the middle stage of the spiritual pulse realm. He swung the black jade sword horizontally, and 36 demonic patterns appeared. A sword ray that combined the intent of sharpness and heaviness flashed past in an instant. Other than Wuxia and Delta Origi, everyone else showed varying degrees of surprise. Xiaofan and Wan Ruei both widened their eyes. Lang Shiqi's current state was even stronger than Gongye Mingshu's. They had just said that this wave was in the bag, and in the blink of an eye, such an unforeseen event had occurred. While they were shocked, they also felt ashamed to the point of being unable to show their faces. Yun Mengxi's eyes were not only filled with surprise, but also a bit of fear. If Lang Shiqi used this move during the battle with her, she would have lost long ago. Even a few Sky Origin Realm experts stared at Lang Shiqi's demonic beast blood rune armor, as if they wanted to figure it out. Old Blockhead transmitted his voice to Old Bones. "Can you see anything mysterious about it?" "Wonderful. It contains blood chi, demonic chi, and demonic chi. How did he fuse these three completely different types of power together?" "There's the aura of the Bloody Slaughter 7 Fiend art here." "Did this kid change the Bloody Slaughter 7 Fiend art?" "Very likely. This child is truly a genius. Our decision to let him live was correct." Meng Ming clenched his fists tightly. No one knew what he was thinking. As for Yushu, his mouth was wide open and his saliva was almost flowing out. He said, "So handsome." At this moment, a hint of worry appeared in Elder Shao's eyes for the first time. On the other hand, Gongye Mingshu was the calmest of them all, because all of his thoughts were focused on how to defeat Lang Shiqi. Gongye Mingshu's figure moved. Intense flames and tyrannical thunderbolts soared into the sky before abruptly smashing down. Lang Shiqi swung his black jade sword, and more than 200 blue frosty sword chis surged in the sky, destroying the soaring flames and lightning. At the same time, a penetrating cold air and an incomparably hot wave of fire gushed out from his body at the same time. Ice and fire were two substances that naturally countered each other. But at this moment, in Lang Shiqi's hands, they actually fused together perfectly. The cold air and the flames intertwined together like a small tornado whistling out. In the 10 days before the battle, Lang Shiqi did not waste his time. His greatest gain was that under Wuxia's guidance, he was able to fuse Spirit Assault, Path of Ice and Spirit Assault, Bombardment of Flames together. It became a fire and ice tornado that was comparable to a 5th-level spiritual skill. Seeing this scene, Wuxia smiled proudly. When some people smiled, of course, there were also people who wanted to cry, such as Gongye Mingxiu. How could he have expected that Lang Shiqi was such a powerful spiritual caster? Although the sudden loss of the Dream Cloud Silk had made him suspicious, he had never thought in this direction. But Gongye Mingxiu was also stimulated with a trace of ruthlessness. His body suddenly arched strangely, but it looked strangely beautiful, as if all the muscles and strength in his body had been adjusted to a perfect state. Then, the flames and lightning around his body twisted and turned, gradually forming the shape of a dragon. And the spear was the dragon's head. Gongye Mingxiu's body suddenly pounced, turning into a large dragon and red lightning, and directly collided with the fire and ice tornado. With a loud boom, huge airwaves exploded with flames, cold air, and thunderbolts. The area within a radius of dozens of meters was turned into a mess. The experts of the Blood Clothing Pavilion and Lyoha Spiritual Region all retreated with their disciples. The flames dissipated, and a broken dragon appeared. The dragon spat out a spear tip that shone with dense spiritual light, and it instantly pierced through Lang Shiqi's figure. We won! Oh no! The disciples of both sides had completely opposite thoughts. However, Gongye Mingxiu was stunned because he did not feel his body being pierced. In other words, the Lang Shiqi in front of him was a fake. Sure enough, Lang Shiqi's body suddenly burst like a bubble, and turned into gorgeous petals that gently fluttered. Gongye Mingxiu looked up vigilantly. Unknowingly, countless petals were sprinkling down from the sky around him. It was like a rain of petals, beautiful and magnificent. At this moment, Gongye Mingxiu was about to be intoxicated by this beautiful world of flowers, but he suddenly bit his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was shocked and said in his heart, "I was almost pulled into an illusion." Then, the countless petals rapidly spun, and then shot towards Gongye Mingxiu. Each petal was actually a sword chi. However, there were real and fake sword chi, and it was impossible to guard against. Gongye Mingxiu held his spear horizontally above his head, and all the spiritual energy in his body converged on the spear. Suddenly, flames rose, and lightning flashed. He wanted to use force to break the technique. However, when his attention was completely focused on the sky, dozens of Lang Shiqi suddenly appeared, and dozens of violent sword chi engulfed Gongye Mingxiu. Gongye Mingxiu turned pale with fright. Facing the sword chi that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, he felt a trace of the threat of death for the first time. This made him want to use his life-saving trump card, but if he did that, he would be able to resolve the current crisis, but he would also lose. At this moment, a huge palm blotted out the sky and instantly destroyed all the sword chi, and the sky was completely swept clean. It was Elder Xiao. This time, Hateful Blade did not stop him. Because if Elder Xiao made a move, it meant that Gongye Mingxiu had lost. At the same time, it also meant that the Six Directions Spiritual Region had lost. Gongye Mingxiu's face was gloomy. As one of the most outstanding disciples of the Six Directions Spiritual Region, he naturally had some pride in his heart. However, he had lost just like that, and he had lost in such a straightforward manner. What made him feel strange was that all the sword chi, as well as the illusions, had disappeared. Where had the Lang Shiqi gone? At this moment, a voice came from beneath Gongye Mingxiu's feet. Let's consider this my win. Chapter 299. 3 days later, Lang Shiqi finished refining the 9-melody spirit fusion pill given to him by the pavilion master. His cultivation had soared to the 5th level of the spiritual pulse realm. As long as his cultivation was high, the power of his spiritual skills would naturally increase. At this moment, There was a knock on the door. Master Wuxiang wants to see you. Got it. Lang Shiqi then stretched his muscles and bones. After cultivating for 3 days, his body was slightly stiff. After a short while, Lang Shiqi came to Wuxiang's place. When Wuxiang saw Lang Shiqi's 5th level of the spiritual pulse realm, he did not say anything. It was as if everything was within his expectations. Wuxiang waved his hand and sprinkled a green light that enveloped the entire hall. Lang Shiqi felt that this should be some kind of isolation restriction. However, he was a little surprised that Wuxiang Palace had to use such a method in the Blood Garment Pavilion. Then, what Wuxiang was going to say next must be of great importance. Wuxiang also put away his unreliable appearance and said solemnly, Lang Shiqi, what I'm going to say next is of great importance. Besides you and me, only the pavilion master knows about this. In this world, I don't want a 4th person to know about this. Lang Shiqi's heart trembled. What was it that even the 2 pavilion masters, the deputy pavilion master and the disciplinary elder could not know about it? He said solemnly, I'll keep that in mind. 3 days ago, you defeated the 6 Directions spiritual region in a battle. At the same time, the Blood Garment Pavilion also received the support of the 6 Directions spiritual region. Then, the next step of the plan can be carried out. That is the Blood Seed Plan after the Blood Fog Island Plan. Blood Seed Plan? Lang Shiqi was confused, but he did not ask any questions. Wuxiang continued, the Blood Seed Plan was originally expected to start in a few years. However, you and Delta Origi have broken through to the spiritual pulse realm one after another and have the ability to protect yourself, so the Blood Seed Plan started in advance. This plan is also an extremely important part of changing the future of the Blood Garment Pavilion. You are the first seed. Do you still remember that I once said that the Blood Garment Pavilion didn't nurture the 4 of you to be assassins? If it was just this, it would never be able to change the situation of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Take a look at this. At this point, Wuxiang suddenly took out a huge box from his mustard seed bag. That box was more than half a zhang long and half a zhang tall. What is this? Lang Shiqi asked curiously. Wuxiang said, you can open it and take a look. Lang Shiqi opened the box. There was a faint musty smell, as if the things inside had been there for a long time. When he opened it, all he saw was a bunch of messy things. This included rattles, strange black rods, children's tattered clothes. There were even a few spiritual artifacts and techniques. It could be said that everything was there. However, these things were all very old. On one side of the box, there were several stacks of thick books. Some were old, some were new, and the newest one seemed to have been bound not long ago. Seeing these things, Lang Shiqi was even more confused. What are these? At this moment, Wuxiang's voice sounded, these are all your things. Lang Shiqi said in surprise. What? My things? His mind raced. He suddenly remembered that he had no memory of this body before he was 10 years old. Could these things be related to the original owner of this body? Wuxiang's tone changed again. To be precise, these are the things of the other you. They are also the traces of the other you being alive. The other me? Lang Shiqi seemed to have vaguely grasped something. He seemed to have experienced this scene before. He remembered. Before he entered the illusory spirit secret realm, Feng Shamo had found him and said that he would arrange a new identity for him, which was the identity of Zhuoqiu. At that time, Feng Shamo had given him some things to hide his identity, including Zhuoqiu's life records. He could not help but think to himself, is Wuxiang, or the Blood Garment Pavilion, also arranging a new identity for me? From today onwards, you are not only the Blood Garment Assassin of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Lang Shiqi. You are no longer just an assassin. You will appear in the world with another identity. We call it birth. Wuxiang's words confirmed Lang Shiqi's thoughts. He thought to himself that it was indeed so. The sect has already prepared a perfect identity for you. No matter who comes to investigate you, they will not reveal any flaws. Now you have a choice. After you birth, it is best to join 2 forces. It can also be said that you are 2 completely different branches of the same force. That is, the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. Discipline Commission, Dark Thunder Guards. Lang Shiqi was shocked. Of course he knew these 2 names. He had even killed Chu Shinran, who was a Dark Thunder Guard. Regardless of whether it was the Discipline Commission or the Dark Thunder Guards, they were directly under the jurisdiction of the Thunderblaze dynasty's royal family. However, they were mainly responsible for different things. The Discipline Commission was like the Thunderblaze dynasty's claws and teeth. It was responsible for handling the conflicts between the dynasty's forces and the spirit cultivator sections. Discipline meant that if they could suppress it, then they would suppress it. If they could not suppress it, then they would appease it. However, the authority of the Discipline Department differed greatly from province to province. For example, in the Muchin County and Donglin County, where there were top forces, the Discipline Commission existed in name only. This was because they did not have the ability to suppress the Blood Robe Pavilion or the Mountain Sea sect. However, in other counties, they might have monstrous authority and power. As for the people of the Discipline Commission, they had never been liked by the people of the leading sections. Even rogue cultivators looked down on them. Their reputation was extremely bad. As for the Dark Thunder Guards, they were the hidden fangs of the Thunderblaze dynasty. The fundamental purpose of the Dark Thunder Guards was to eliminate all people, things, and things that affected the stability of the dynasty. From supervising the royal family, civil and military officials, to eliminating spirit cultivators who caused trouble, they were all under their jurisdiction. For example, Wuxia was secretly investigated by the Dark Thunder Guards and found evidence of him secretly manufacturing weapons, leading to the execution of Wuxia's entire family. For example, the black-veiled woman that Lang Shiqi met in the illusory spirit secret realm was to investigate the 5 devil cultivators who caused trouble. No matter where the Dark Thunder Guards were, they had a lot of power. Even the lowest-level Dark Thunder Guards had the right to act at their own discretion. That meant that they could ignore the laws of the Thunderblaze dynasty and directly act first and report later. Therefore, the Dark Thunder Guards were hated by the people of the dynasty. And now, Wuxia actually asked Lang Shiqi to choose one of them. Lang Shiqi had already vaguely guessed what the Blood Robe Pavilion wanted to do. They were clearly asking him to be a spy. However, the Discipline Commission had become enemies with the spirit cultivators of the world. The Dark Thunder Guards were hated by the various forces of the dynasty. Neither of these were good places to go. If he had to choose between the two, Lang Shiqi hesitated for a moment, but he was still more willing to choose the Dark Thunder Guards. Perhaps it was because he was used to walking in the dark that he would be more proficient in doing things in the dark. Moreover, the Dark Thunder Guards had the right to act at their own discretion, which also gave him some initiative. Thus, he said, "Disciple is willing to go to the Dark Thunder Guards." Wuxia nodded and said, "Yes, I will arrange this matter for you as soon as possible. Take these things back and take a good look. Be sure to memorize every word and sentence." Disciple understands. Lang Shiqi cupped his hands and said. Then, he casually opened a page of the book, but there was a name that he would never have dreamed of, Lu Xingji. Chapter 300. 3 days later, Lang Shiqi finished refining the 9-melody spirit fusion pill given to him by the Pavilion Master. His cultivation had soared to the 5th level of the spiritual pulse realm. As long as his cultivation was high, the power of his spiritual skills would naturally increase. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Master Wuxia wants to see you." "Got it." Lang Shiqi then stretched his muscles and bones. After cultivating for 3 days, his body was slightly stiff. After a short while, Lang Shiqi came to Wuxia's place. When Wuxia saw Lang Shiqi's 5th level of the spiritual pulse realm, he did not say anything. It was as if everything was within his expectations. Wuxia waved his hand and sprinkled a green light that enveloped the entire hall. Lang Shiqi felt that this should be some kind of isolation restriction. However, he was a little surprised that Wuxiang Palace had to use such a method in the Blood Garment Pavilion. Then, what Wuxiang was going to say next must be of great importance. Wuxiang also put away his unreliable appearance and said solemnly, "Lang Shiqi, what I'm going to say next is of great importance. Besides you and me, only the Pavilion Master knows about this. In this world, I don't want a 4th person to know about this." Lang Shiqi's heart trembled. What was it that even the 2 Pavilion Masters, the Deputy Pavilion Master and the Disciplinary Elder, could not know about it? He said solemnly, "I'll keep that in mind. 3 days ago, you defeated the 6 Directions spiritual region in a battle. At the same time, The Blood Garment Pavilion also received the support of the Six Directions spiritual region. Then, the next step of the plan can be carried out. That is the Blood Seed Plan after the Blood Fog Island Plan. Blood Seed Plan? Leng Shiqi was confused, but he did not ask any questions. Wu Xiang continued, the Blood Seed Plan was originally expected to start in a few years. However, you and Delta Origi have broken through to the spiritual pulse realm one after another and have the ability to protect yourself, so the Blood Seed Plan started in advance. This plan is also an extremely important part of changing the future of the Blood Garment Pavilion. You are the first seed. Do you still remember that I once said that the Blood Garment Pavilion didn't nurture the four of you to be assassins? If it was just this, it would never be able to change the situation of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Take a look at this. At this point, Wu Xiang suddenly took out a huge box from his mustard seed bag. That box was more than half a zhang long and half a zhang tall. What is this? Leng Shiqi asked curiously. Wu Xiang said, you can open it and take a look. Leng Shiqi opened the box. There was a faint musty smell, as if the things inside had been there for a long time. When he opened it, all he saw was a bunch of messy things. This included rattles, strange black rods, children's tattered clothes. There were even a few spiritual artifacts and techniques. It could be said that everything was there. However, these things were all very old. On one side of the box, there were several stacks of thick books. Some were old, some were new, and the newest one seemed to have been bound not long ago. Seeing these things, Leng Shiqi was even more confused. What are these? At this time, Wu Xiang's voice sounded. These are all your things. Leng Shiqi was surprised. What? My things? His mind raced. He suddenly remembered that he had no memory of this body before he was 10 years old. Could these things be related to the original owner of this body? Wu Xiang's tone changed again. To be precise, these are the things of the other you. They are also the traces of the other you being alive. The other me? Leng Shiqi seemed to have vaguely grasped something. He seemed to have experienced this scene before. He remembered. Before he entered the illusory spirit secret realm, Feng Shamo had found him and said that he would arrange a new identity for him, which was the identity of Zhuo. At that time, Feng Shamo had given him some things to hide his identity, including Zhuo's life records. He could not help but think to himself, is Wu Xiang, or the Blood Garment Pavilion, also arranging a new identity for me? From today onwards, you are not only the Blood Garment Assassin of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Leng Shiqi. You are no longer just an assassin. You will appear in the world with another identity. We call it birth. Wu Xiang's words confirmed Leng Shiqi's thoughts. He thought to himself that it was indeed so. The sect has already prepared a perfect identity for you. No matter who comes to investigate you, they will not reveal any flaws. Now you have a choice. After you birth, it is best to join two forces. It can also be said that you are two completely different branches of the same force. That is, the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. Discipline Commission, Dark Thunder Guards. Leng Shiqi was shocked. Of course he knew these two names. He had even killed Chu Xinran, who was a Dark Thunder Guard. Regardless of whether it was the Discipline Commission or the Dark Thunder Guards, they were directly under the jurisdiction of the Thunderblaze dynasty's royal family. However, they were mainly responsible for different things. The Discipline Commission was like the claws and teeth of the Thunderblaze dynasty. It dealt with the conflicts between the dynasty's forces and the spirit cultivator sections. Discipline meant that if it could be suppressed, then it would be suppressed. If it could not be suppressed, then it would be appeased. However, the authority of the discipline department differed greatly from province to province. For example, in the Muqin County and Donglin County, where there were top forces, the Discipline Commission existed in name only. This was because they did not have the ability to suppress the Blood Robe Pavilion or the Mountain Sea sect. However, in other counties, they might have monstrous authority and power. As for the people of the Discipline Commission, they had never been liked by the people of the leading sections. Even rogue cultivators looked down on them. Their reputation was extremely bad. As for the Dark Thunder Guards, they were the hidden fangs of the Thunderblaze dynasty. The fundamental purpose of the Dark Thunder Guards was to eliminate all people, things, and things that affected the stability of the dynasty. From supervising the royal family, civil and military officials, to eliminating the spirit cultivators who caused trouble. They were all under their jurisdiction. For example, Wuxia was secretly investigated by the Dark Thunder Guards and found evidence of him secretly manufacturing weapons, leading to the execution of Wuxia's entire family. For example, the black-veiled woman that Lang Shiqi met in the illusory spirit secret realm was to investigate the 5 devil cultivators who caused trouble. No matter where the Dark Thunder Guards were, they had a lot of power. Even the lowest-level Dark Thunder Guards had the right to act at their own discretion. That meant that they could ignore the laws of the Thunderblaze dynasty and directly act first and report later. Therefore, the Dark Thunder Guards were hated by the people of the dynasty. And now, Wuxia actually asked Lang Shiqi to choose one of them. Lang Shiqi had already vaguely guessed what the Blood Robe Pavilion was going to do. They were clearly asking him to be a spy. However, the Discipline Commission was on bad terms with the spirit cultivators of the world. The Dark Thunder Guards were hated by the various forces of the dynasty. Neither of these were good places to go. If he had to choose between the two, Lang Shiqi hesitated for a moment, but he was still more willing to choose the Dark Thunder Guards. Perhaps it was because he was used to walking in the dark that he would be more proficient in doing things in the dark. Moreover, the Dark Thunder Guards had the right to act at their own discretion, which also gave him some initiative. Thus, he said, "Disciple is willing to go to the Dark Thunder Guards." Wuxia nodded and said, "Yes, I will arrange this for you as soon as possible. Take these things back and take a good look. Be sure to memorize every word and sentence." Disciple understands. Lang Shiqi cupped his hands and said. Then, he casually opened a page of the book, but there was a name that he would never have dreamed of, Lu Xingji. Chapter 301. At night, Lang Shiqi locked himself in a secret room in his room. He carefully read through everything about Lu Xingji. In this information, from the day Lu Xingji was born, it recorded in detail all the people and things he had come in contact with. When Lu Xingji was 12 years old, he was accepted as a disciple by a wandering spirit cultivator and went to travel around. The strange thing was, when Lang Shiqi looked at these things, he actually had a feeling that he had experienced them before. This kind of feeling actually made him shudder. He began to suspect that these things, were they things that this body had experienced before? In other words, this Lu Xingji was actually him. Lang Shiqi formed a guess in his mind. Lu Xingji was a native of this world. Before the age of 12, he grew up happily like an ordinary child. But when he was 12 years old, he was discovered to have a high cultivation talent and was thrown into the Blood Fog Island. Lu Xingji died not long after in the Blood Fog Island and was replaced by another Lu Xingji who came from another world, which was the current Lang Shiqi. The more Lang Shiqi thought about it, the more he felt that this was very likely, and it seemed very reasonable. But Lang Shiqi thought of another illogical existence. If it was really as he guessed, and the information given by Wuxia was the original experience of this body, then why was there a need to prepare so well? These were originally the memories of Lu Xingji. Why was there a need to prepare detailed information about what happened every day? Moreover, it was impossible for a person to remember everything that happened when they were young. This would make it seem like there were many traces left behind. This made Lang Shiqi's heart beat like a drum, and he was a little unable to confirm his initial speculation. He racked his brains for a long time, but still could not find the most reasonable explanation. In the end, he could only bury all of this in his heart and wait for the opportunity to inquire about it in the future. Next, he continued to absorb the explosive amount of information about Lu Xingji. Even with his strong mental strength, it took him until the 4th day to completely remember Lu Xingji's life. At this time, he also found a loophole in the information. That was, according to the information, Lu Xingji became a disciple of a spirit cultivator when he was 12 years old. That spirit cultivator was called Chu Hejing, a powerful rogue cultivator in the realm of unity of heaven and man. However, Lang Shiqi did not know Chu Hejing at all. Let alone being Chu Hejing's disciple, he should have some inheritance, right? He did not have any at all. Another point was that the information in the information was that Lu Xingji's information, which was very much at the age of his age. But since it was perfect information, there must have been some kind of arrangement. Coincidentally, Wuxia had actually come looking for him at this moment. The strange thing was that Wuxia had actually appeared directly in his private room. He clasped his hands, clasped his clasped hands, clasped his hands clasped. Disciple Gren asked. Shichi's in, every word has been engraved in disciple's mind. Lung Shichi said confidently. Very good. Master will take you to a place. Shichi said as he grabbed Lung Shichi's arm. Lung Shichi felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, in the next moment, the scenery around him suddenly changed, and his eyes spun. When he finally stepped on the ground, he was already in an abnormally dark room. This darkness was nothing to a spirit pulse realm cultivator, and he could see clearly with his spirit energy. He immediately saw that there was an abnormally complex spirit array in the room. At this moment, he and Shichi were standing in the middle of the array. Shichi waved his hand and hundreds of sparkling and translucent spirit stones fell precisely into the grooves around the array. Lung Shichi looked at the abnormally dense spirit stones, and his heart trembled. Every spirit stone was actually a middle-grade spirit stone. Every middle-grade spirit stone's value was more than 100 times that of a normal spirit stone. Wuxia was throwing money away. Lung Shichi couldn't help but ask, Master, where are we? Shichi said proudly, this is an inter-province teleportation formation. There are only a few in the entire Thunderfire dynasty, and our Blood Garment Pavilion has one. Inter-province teleportation formation? Although Lung Shichi didn't know how far the teleportation formation could go, he knew that they would be going to a very far place. Wuxia explained, Next, we'll go to the place where you'll join the Dark Thunder Guards. We'll erase your identity as a member of the Blood Clothing Pavilion. We'll have to choose a place very far away from Yukon County. Hearing this, Lung Shichi nodded lightly. Soon after, mysterious spirit arrays lit up in the array, and the two of them gradually disappeared. The 6 kingdoms of the western regions were small countries sandwiched between the Thunderfire dynasty and the Starfall dynasty. Among the 6 kingdoms, the largest was only about the size of 2 provinces in the Thunderfire dynasty. The smallest was not even half the size of a province. The reason why the 6 kingdoms still existed was because they were equivalent to a buffer zone between the Thunderfire dynasty and the Starfall dynasty. No matter which side wanted to send troops, they had to first cross the 6 kingdoms of the western regions. This way, the other side would naturally have enough time to react. The Western Desolation County was the westernmost province of the Thunderfire dynasty. It also bordered the Zhulu Kingdom and the Gaoji Kingdom of the 6 kingdoms of the western regions. Although the Western Desolation County had the word desolation in its name, it wasn't actually desolate. On the contrary, it was abnormally prosperous. Because the Thunderfire dynasty accepted all kinds of people, they didn't reject the 6 kingdoms of the western regions and even vigorously promoted all kinds of trade. Therefore, a large number of merchants from the 6 kingdoms of the western regions could be seen coming and going in the Western Desolation County. It was extraordinarily lively. On this day, 2 guests came to the capital of the Western Desolation County, Western Desolation City. One of them was a slightly plump middle-aged man. His face was very ordinary, but he had a small mustache and wore a small red round hat on his head. He looked a little funny. But absolutely no one would have thought that this funny-looking man was actually the famous Nether Bloodcloak assassin of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, Wuxia. So, the one beside him was naturally Lung Shichi. But at this moment, Lung Shichi was showing his original appearance, but also not his original appearance. According to Wuxia, Lung Shichi's true appearance was too young and didn't match his cultivation. Using external objects to change one's appearance could fool ordinary people, but those true experts would still see through it. At that time, trying to cover it up would only make it more conspicuous. So Lung Shichi's current appearance was because he had taken a strange pill similar to hormones, which caused his body to develop ahead of time. He also grew a mustache and looked like a strong man around 30 years old. The two of them had directly crossed several provinces and counties from the Yukon County to the Western Desolation County through the inter-province transportation formation. As it turned out, Wuxia wanted Lung Shichi to join the Dark Thunder Guards of the Western Desolation County. And the reason why he was able to arrange for Lung Shichi to join was because he had a close relationship with the inspector of the Dark Thunder Guards of the Western Desolation County. No, to be more precise, Lu Xingji's master, Chu Hejing, had a close relationship with the inspector of the Western Desolation County, Yu Ruifeng. Wuxia was Chu Hejing. Chapter 302. The Western Wilderness City was a city with a large flow of people, and people from the western regions could be seen everywhere. However, there was a very wide but desolate street in the Western Wilderness City. The reason was that the Dark Thunder Mansion was located in this street. This was the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards in the Western Wilderness Prefecture. The Dark Thunder Guards were notorious in the imperial court. Many high officials and nobles avoided them, so this street was deserted. Lang Shiqi followed Wu Xiang to the gate of the Dark Thunder Mansion. Wu Xiang handed over a name card, and soon a group of 5 people came out to welcome them. The leader was an old man with sharp eyes. He was not young, but there was still a trace of sharpness in his body. He was the inspector of the Dark Thunder Guards in the Western Wilderness Prefecture, Yu Ruifeng, who had the cultivation of oneness of heaven and men. He was responsible for patrolling the entire Western Wilderness Prefecture, and was a real figure with real power. The 4 people behind him were also in Gang Spirit Realm. They were the inspectors in charge of monitoring the Western Wilderness Prefecture. Yu Ruifeng greeted them with a smile. "Brother Chu, long time no see. Please come in." Wu Xiang, who was Chu Huzhing, said with a smile, "You don't have to be so polite with me. Please come in." Seeing Lang Shiqi, Yu Ruifeng said, "Oh? This little brother must be Brother Chu's disciple Lu Xingji." "Haha, it's my disciple Lu Xingji. Why don't you greet the seniors?" Wu Xiang said to Lang Shiqi. Lang Shiqi immediately cupped his hands and said, "Junior Lu Xingji greets Martial Uncle Yu and seniors." Yu Ruifeng and the others stared at Lang Shiqi for a few seconds, and then he exclaimed, "Nephew, you have the cultivation of middle-stage spiritual pulse realm at such a young age. It's true that a famous teacher produces a brilliant disciple." "Ha ha." Wu Xiang laughed and said, "It's not worth mentioning. My disciple still has a lot to learn." Hearing this, Yu Ruifeng's eyes flashed with a trace of shrewdness, and he said with a smile, "Brother Chu, nephew, let's talk in the hall." They chatted and laughed as they walked into the hall. Lang Shiqi followed them silently. Everyone took their seats and chatted for a while. Lang Shiqi found that Yu Ruifeng didn't seem to be pretending to smile at Wu Xiang, but was really enthusiastic. Wu Xiang saw that the small talk was almost over, so he began to talk about the main topic. "Brother Yu, I'm ashamed to say this, but I actually have a request for you this time." Yu Ruifeng didn't look surprised. He had already guessed what was going on the moment he saw Lang Shiqi. "Brother Chu, what are you talking about? If there's anything you want, just say it. As long as it's within my power, I'll definitely agree." Lang Shiqi was a little surprised. He didn't know what kind of magic potion Yu Ruifeng had fed him, but he agreed without even hearing the request. "This matter is related to my good-for-nothing disciple." Wu Xiang pointed at Lang Shiqi and said, "My disciple's cultivation is barely passable, but he still lacks a lot of training. I came this time to find an opportunity for him to gain experience." He came to find an opportunity to gain experience, but he came to the Dark Thunder Guard. The meaning of Wu Xiang's words was very obvious. At this time, the eyes of the 4 inspectors flashed. The Dark Thunder Guard was not a place that anyone could enter casually. The Dark Thunder Guard's duty was to monitor the world, so the most basic requirement to enter the Dark Thunder Guard was to have a clean background. Even your 3 generations of ancestors will be thoroughly investigated. Anyone who has the slightest bit of criminal past will not be allowed to enter. It didn't matter how good your talent was or how high your cultivation was. The first requirement of the Dark Thunder Guard was to be completely loyal to the royal family. Wu Xiang's request could be said to be easy, but it could also be said to be difficult. The main thing was to see if Lu Xingji's identity was clean enough. If his background was clean, it didn't matter if he did a favor. If there were some traces of his background, it wouldn't be easy to handle. However, what the 4 inspectors didn't expect was that Yu Ruifeng would agree to it so easily. He said, "I thought it was something important. Brother Chu came in person for such a small matter? Actually, you only need to send a letter." The 4 inspectors were all shrewd people, but at this time, they couldn't help showing traces of shock. In their impression, Yu Ruifeng was an extremely strict person. How could he agree to Chu Huzhing's request so easily? Letting Lang Shiqi enter the Dark Thunder Guard without asking or investigating was against the rules of the Dark Thunder Guard. It was also inconsistent with Yu Ruifeng's usual style. What was the relationship between Yu Ruifeng and Chu Huzhing? It wasn't just them, even Lang Shiqi thought the same. Wuxiang said, I won't make things difficult for Brother Yu. Brother, you can investigate my disciple's background as you wish. I won't break the rules of the Dark Thunder Guard. Yu Ruifeng said with a smile, let's not talk about this for now. I see that nephew has the cultivation of the middle stage of the Spirit Pulse realm. It's a bit of a waste of talent to just be a Dark Thunder Guard. By the way, do you have any empty inspectors under your rule? The 4 inspectors almost sprained their tongues. They began to wonder if Yu Ruifeng had said something wrong. Inspector? That was a position that only the Spirit Aperture realm had the qualifications to hold. Not only did the cultivation have to be high enough, but they also had to have the corresponding ability and experience. Hearing Yu Ruifeng's words, he wanted Lu Xingji to directly be an inspector? One of them said carefully, Lord Yu, nephew Lu has such a cultivation at such a young age. It's amazing. However, if he becomes an inspector with the cultivation of the Spirit Pulse realm, I'm afraid there will be people who won't accept it. Yu Ruifeng glanced at him and said coldly, Duan Chun, are you questioning my decision? Duan Chun immediately stood up and said, This subordinate doesn't dare. Humph. Didn't your North County lose a supervisor not long ago? Why don't you let nephew Lu replace him? Yu Ruifeng's tone was normal this time, but there was an unquestionable meaning in it. This subordinate understands. This subordinate will go prepare the transfer order. Duan Chun said and left. Yu Ruifeng turned to Wuxiang and said, Brother Chu, are you satisfied? Wuxiang said happily, Brother Yu is too serious. It's good enough that my disciple has a chance to gain experience. I'm afraid he won't be able to take up the position of inspector. I see that nephew Lu isn't a fish in a pond. A mere inspector is nothing. Xingji, why aren't you thanking Marshal Uncle Yu? Lang Shiqi was just about to stand up when Yu Ruifeng pressed his hand down. A gentle force pressed him back down. Yu Ruifeng said, Brother Chu, you're being too polite. It's not worth mentioning. By the way, tonight we brothers won't go home until we're drunk. Okay, we won't go home until we're drunk. Late at night, Lang Shiqi supported the drunk Wuxiang back to the room Yu Ruifeng arranged for them. As soon as they entered the room, Wuxiang raised his hand and set up an isolation restriction. He didn't look drunk at all. Chapter 303. Lang Shiqi saw that Wuxiang's expression wasn't good and had many questions. For example, what was the relationship between Wuxiang and Yu Ruifeng? But he didn't ask. If he could find out, Wuxiang would naturally tell him. Wuxiang said calmly, Originally, with your cultivation, you were the most suitable person to be the Dark Lightning Envoy. Even if you came in through the back door, others wouldn't say anything. But Yu Ruifeng directly arranged for you to be the supervisor. The supervisor is a position with real power. Even normal Spirit Aperture realm cultivators may not have the qualifications to take up this position. He wants to push you into the teeth of the storm. Once you can't hold this position, you won't be able to stay in the Dark Lightning Guards. This way, he has returned my favor and didn't break the rules of the Dark Lightning Guards. His move of retreating in order to advance is really brilliant. At this point, Wuxiang changed the topic. But he definitely didn't expect you to be able to sit in this position. You also have to sit tight. Lang Shiqi knew that this matter was of great importance. Since he had already chosen the Dark Lightning Guards, he could only follow this path to the end. Even if taking over the supervisor position would bring him endless pressure and trouble, he had to endure it. Disciple understands. Seeing Lang Shiqi's attitude, Wuxiang nodded his head in satisfaction. Yu Ruifeng will definitely investigate your background, and he will even turn it upside down. But you don't have to worry, he won't find anything. Tomorrow, you can take the transfer order and take up the position. Master believes in your ability and will of course support you. Take this first. Wuxiang took out a mustard seed bag and gave it to Lang Shiqi. Lang Shiqi used his mental power to check it and was immediately stunned. This mustard seed bag was filled with cultivation resources. Just the third transformation spirit pills alone had a total of 30 pills, each of which was worth several hundred spirit stones. In addition, There were 5,000 spirit stones and all kinds of pills that spirit aperture realm cultivators could use. And what made Lang Shiqi the most happy was that there were cultivation methods and spiritual skills inside. The cultivation method was called Amorphous Truth, and was a rank 4 cultivation method. Their spiritual skills were only at the 3rd level, but there were many of them. Sword techniques, saber techniques, finger techniques, leg techniques, staff techniques. This included 18 types of weapons and all types of spiritual techniques. There were even spiritual techniques and illusions. In total, there were over 23rd stage spiritual skills. Lang Shiqi secretly swallowed his saliva. He had never seen so many spiritual techniques in front of him, and all of them were real. He actually felt like he had made a windfall. Wuxia said, "Since you're Chu Hajing's disciple, your techniques should have some traces of your master. These are spiritual techniques that I often used when I was young. You can use them as you wish. I also know that your perception is extremely high, and I believe that you will be able to cultivate it very quickly. That is why I am giving it to you now. With these, there is no possibility of your identity being exposed. In addition, it will be difficult for you to secure the position of supervisor by yourself." Wu Xiang took out a blood-red token and said, "Of course, the Blood Cloak Pavilion won't just throw you into the Dark Thunder Guard. Your only mission in the Dark Thunder Guard is to climb up by hook or by crook. The higher you climb, the better. Yu Ruifeng gave you the position of supervisor, which is also a great opportunity for you. You must remember that you are not fighting alone. The Blood Cloak Pavilion is your backing. With this silver-striped blood kill token, you can mobilize anyone under the golden-striped Blood Cloak Assassin in the Western Desolate Province. You can also mobilize the entire intelligence network in the Western Desolate Province." Hiss. Hearing this, Lang Shiqi couldn't help but inwardly take in a cold breath. With this token, he could mobilize any spirit aperture realm assassin as well as a huge intelligence network. This was a great power. In the Western Desolate Province, his power was probably second only to the head of the pavilion. However, Lang Shiqi also knew that the Blood Cloak Pavilion gave him such great power, and he also had a great responsibility. Although Wu Xiang didn't say what the Blood Seed plan was, Lang Shiqi could guess that the Blood Cloak Pavilion wanted him to climb up to the position of Dark Thunder Guard commander. Not only him, there was also Delta Origi, Yu Shu, and Xiong Ming. Sooner or later, the 3 of them would be arranged into different forces. With the secret support of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, they could quickly rise up to the top. In the future, the 4 of them would very likely be in charge of a powerful force. At that time, they would have the opportunity to help the Blood Cloak Pavilion break the deadlock and soar to the top. This was the Blood Seed plan. You are a smart person. This is all I have to say. As for where you can climb in the future, it will depend on your own ability." Wu Xiang then removed the isolation restriction and went back to his room to rest. Lang Shiqi also went back to his room. The first thing he did was to use his unlimited skill points to learn all the cultivation methods and spiritual skills. And all of them were cultivated to the Great Perfection realm. With so many spiritual skills, not only did Lang Shiqi's combat power increase, but it also gave him more possibilities to fuse spiritual skills. Then, he began to plan in his mind how he could secure his position as a supervisor. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Not only Lang Shiqi, but in Lanqi City, hundreds of miles away, there were also 4 people who could not sleep. They were sitting in a circle with gloomy expressions. The atmosphere was very solemn. They were the Dark Lightning envoys of the West Desolate Province's North County. They were all in the spiritual pulse realm. Among them, the one with the highest cultivation was a gray-haired old man in his 60s or 70s. He was in the 8th level of the spiritual pulse realm. The 2 people sitting on his left and right were in the middle stage of the spiritual pulse realm. Opposite him was an early-stage spiritual pulse realm cultivator. You all know the news from the West Desolate Province's headquarters, right? The old man's voice was a bit harsh. The other 3 nodded in agreement. Every branch of the Dark Thunder Guard had a sound transmission array, which was used to transmit information quickly. Not long ago, they all knew that a new supervisor would be appointed in a few days. The person on the right of the old man said, "Brother Gong Sun Bing, could it be that the headquarters sent the wrong news?" Gong Sun Bing said in annoyance, "How can the news from the great supervisor be fake?" Cho Cheng, Are you questioning the great supervisor? Qiu Cheng was inexplicably rebuked and did not say anything. The tall and sturdy man opposite him said, Brother Gong's son, why did the higher-up send us a spiritual pulse realm middle stage supervisor? Even if Lan Qi City is very remote, this is too perfunctory. If a spiritual pulse realm cultivator can be a supervisor, Brother Gong's son, you are the most suitable. Finally, the early-stage spiritual pulse realm cultivator said, Brother Pang Yuan is right. Sigh. Gong's son Bing sighed deeply and said, I specially paid a high price to use a sound transmission array to contact a good friend in the West Desolate Province's headquarters. Only then did I know that the new supervisor was personally appointed by the Patrol Inspector Yu. It is said that someone used their connections to send him in. So he went in through the back door. The others immediately showed disdainful expressions. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.